Let me see. I shouldn't have anything that's gonna get me dinged at all. Like, man. All right. So wait a minute. Hang on. Yeah, are we live now? Good. Good. We should be live. Nick. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Like this is one of those games. I don't know if you feel the way I do, but like consider this the green room, right, Nick? Where you always knew these Bears had it in them, but you didn't actually think after what happened in Cleveland that they were going to show this off. You know what I mean? Like, this was awesome. This was an awesome game.
I mean, Christmas already came and gone, but this is definitely well because you had the Bears performance,
Right.
but then Robert, like I assume you have some kind of drink. I only have water today, but I feel like we need to give a little cheers because we both just
I
got
also
the
only
number
have
one
water.
pick as well.
We have
So
the number one pick, and I want to just quickly say, like, there are plenty of times, Nick. There are plenty of times where if I think that the Bears community don't call me a hero. I'm more trying to make a big deal out of this because I think it's funny, right? But if you know me at all, Nick, you know that if I think there's a conversation that needs to be had, especially a hard conversation, I will push into borderline devil's advocate territory. But today, man, this is the Justin Fields we thought we were going to get. I sit here
yep.
like, where's the spin? If you gave me this like 3 more times this season, I wouldn't have had to say
Hmm.
half the stuff I've said. Like, this was awesome. This was
Yep.
so
What
great.
and even the ones that he missed on, there were two
Whatever.
touchdowns dropped. There was a third down that was like potential could have been caught too. So like he was on, and then the
N-
misses were like it was
People
a
miss.
fourth.
People
Yeah,
miss. Can we
right.
can we just say that? Like,
Yeah.
elite quarterbacks don't end with a 95% completion percentage. Like,
Nope.
you miss sometimes.
And
Whatever. Like,
and the runs and getting out of
oh,
sacks.
like getting out of the sacks. I mean, the dime to Tyler Scott that he doesn't come down with, the
Yep.
other dime to Tyler Scott that he doesn't come down with.
The
Like,
DJ Moore ones, the
a
one on the sideline
hundred,
on third
and
down.
there's no way a sane person, and hey, I'll talk about the hard part here in a second, right? But there's no way a sane person doesn't walk out of that game thinking, hot dang, you get Justin Fields one more sick weapon minimum, but
Yep.
God forbid you
Yep.
get him two. And
So
like, what's he gonna do about it? And now, Nick, here's the hard part that we'll talk about in the green room. I'll bring it back up on the podcast. Ryan Poles has a really funky decision to make because there's no way if you and I are saying this that other GMs aren't also saying this, right?
mhm,
Like in the
mhm,
words of The Wire, the price of the brick just went up,
yep.
whichever direction you're looking at. Like
Mhm.
now, getting the Bears to give up the number one overall pick, well, I mean, it's Caleb Williams. Like, what are you really? You're really going to make us do that? Well, you're going to have to pay through the nose. But you want to take Justin Fields off the Bears. Like, you make it two. You make it two teams that actually get in a bidding war with a first round pick involved. And oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
And we might have played one of them today. Hey, I got to address one thing though. Even though we're in the green room, Robert, I see some people talking about. I'm sporting a stash.
Oh, yeah.
For the people that are watching the video here. Um, I so here's why. One, I wanted to shave, and two, in kind of a little honor of Arthur Smith, our opposing coach today. He rocked the stash for a big part of the year. I thought it'd be funny to do it, and maybe I got in Arthur Smith's head. He felt the stash power, and he couldn't overcome today.
No, no chance. I mean, gosh, the Falcons got outclassed on both sides of the ball, left and right. I mean, I understand that you can't really do this, but the Bears are basically one blown screen pass away from an even more convincing defensive victory. Like, it's easy to look at 17-37 and feel like, wow, the Bears pounded them. They ripped off 75 yards off of one screenplay that went against the Bears. Like, this, oh my gosh, Nick, this was unbelievable. You want to record a podcast?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many parts to it, I think, that make it unbelievable. Yeah, let's rip and go because then we can chat with a lot of people that are gonna be in
Let's
here.
do it. Let's do it. All right. So for those of you who know the drill, hi, nice to meet you. I'm Robert Schmitz. This is Nick Whalen. We record a Bears podcast. It's called Bear With Us. You should give it a look if you haven't already. But we're gonna go ahead and record the podcast. If you type something in the stream chat, we're going to try to work it into the podcast with the show.
You
And
muted
so,
yourself, Robert.
well, not on purpose. It says,
On Google.
how did I do? Gotcha. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. See,
Well,
thank you.
not now it's your other mic, I think.
It's come on. It's because I touched it and then it unplugged itself. All right,
Yep.
so let's go Yeti
There you go.
Classic.
There you go.
Bada boom.
Perfect.
Perfect. All right,
You
so
sound beautiful.
that's all I'm looking for. But so at this point, let me see. I got to bring you down to the usual mic stuff. I'm ready. You're ready. Let's talk about some Bears, and then after that, everybody can go celebrate the new year in style. All right,
Yeah,
ready?
man. Mhm.
The Chicago Bears send off 2023 the only way they know how with a crushing victory at home over the Atlanta Falcons in the snow that had Chicago rocking. Everything went well today, which is why Nick and I are basically going to raise a glass to the number one overall pick, to a phenomenal looking roster, to one of the greatest trades in NFL history, more than likely, and a bevy of offseason options, none of which are unexciting. But we'll talk about all that and more on this episode of Bear With Us. What's going on, everybody? And I'm going to do that one more time. What's going on, everybody? And welcome back to Bear With Us, a Chicago Bears podcast hosted by yours truly, Robert Schmitz, editor-in-chief of the Bears blog, right here with Nick Whalen, my co-host of Football Guys. And Nick, gosh, I was just talking about this with my brother. This might be one of the greatest Bears afternoons of my life. I mean, you just see those two things happening at the same time. The Bears are cruising. Arrow looks way up. Justin Fields, who I know of the two of us, I've been the one that's been harder on him. Justin Fields looked like everything we ever dreamed he would be all offseason long. Clear
Mhm.
arrow going up. I mean, gosh, Nick, I don't know if the Bears could have put a foot wrong today. The only sour note, if there is a sour note about this game, is that it just makes the Cleveland one, the Denver one, the Detroit one look that little bit grosser, because this team looks like they could this team looks like a team that could raise hell in the playoffs. But what are you seeing? What are you feeling? How are you
Well,
feeling?
I mean, to correct what you said there, you mean when they get in the playoffs? Because it's still a possibility, and it
I
and it could
forgot.
be fun. I mean, 5 of the last 7 games have been wins. The other 2 have been those, disaster, they let Cleveland and Detroit come back. Really, it could almost be a 7-game winning streak here, which
You
is
could argue it.
insane to think about. But to answer your question, Robert, I feel fantastic. This feels like an extra Christmas present I wasn't expecting on New Year's Eve. Um, and I talked about this off air, but for people that are watching the live stream, I'm rocking the stash. And I feel like that had a little bit of power because Arthur Smith, Atlanta's head coach, rocked the stash this year. So I thought I could combat him a little bit with that. But like you're
I
talking
love
about,
it.
I mean, it wasn't even close.
No.
And that was from the start to finish and everywhere in between. There was like a couple plays that I feel like Chicago allowed to have happen that let Atlanta closer into the game, but there's also a couple of plays where it could have been even more of a blowout, which,
Oh
you know,
yeah.
is something I thought of. Atlanta, warm dorm or a dome team coming to Chicago in December. It's not a really good recipe for them.
No, not a good recipe at all. But even wilder is, I don't know how you felt, Nick, but okay, so look, let's just address the elephant in the room, right? If you're not a Matt Eberflus fan, I don't have any idea whether you were actually cheering for the Bears to win or not. I definitely flipped in the middle of the game because it was too much fun watching the guys play well. How do you not love that? Like, they win you over so quickly. Not to mention, I mean, they flat out dominated with a capital D, Nick. Like, there wasn't any sense in cheering for Taylor Heineke to luck his way down the field a second or third time. But I don't remember Atlanta ever getting within a one score game after the Bears got up by two. Like, I think they closed it from a 3-score game to a 2-score game, But
Mhm.
if that's what it takes to make something close or to make people tense, like we got to look ourselves in the mirror and admit that, like you just mentioned from earlier, the Bears are two historic 90+% win percentage losses away from a 7-game win streak. Like the Bears are making a habit of getting into the fourth quarter up quite a bit. It's just whether or not they hang on to the lead. And man, if that's really what we're worried about with a center that seemingly can't play,
Oh my
like
gosh.
with one receiver that was healthy on a day like today,
Yep.
and with an inside middle linebacker in Tremaine Edmonds that drops what would have been the champagne popping third pick of the game. Like,
Mhm.
what are we worried
I
about?
know. Yeah. I mean, it's and again, like we talked about this, and it's again, let us dream here a little bit, y'all. Okay.
Right.
You flipped the 2 games you talked about around and made this a 7-game win streak. Chicago is 9-7 right now, and they are 1 game back from Detroit for the division. You flip back all 3 90 percentile ones they should have won, adding in Denver. They are tied for the division lead right now,
Hmm.
and they've locked up a playoff spot. So that's the tough part with the whole Flus thing is like, I know we saw the article, right, or report from Rappaport that came out yesterday, but that had the caveat of he needs to finish the season well. And oh boy, did he. So that leaves you next week, Robert, with what has to happen next week for Chicago to not even think about moving on from Flus or Fields.
Well, I mean, gosh, if you don't get undressed by the Packers, I would struggle to imagine the vibes from this game getting tamped down that hard. Like you would have needed to have a win where you squeezed it out against Atlanta in the worst case scenario, in my opinion, to really make next week a coin flip. I mean, you got to remember the Bears. If memory is serving me well, the Bears are now like 24-28 in their last like 30 meetups with the Packers. Sorry, by that I mean they have lost 24 of their last 28 meetings with the Packers. I should have clarified that. I don't think they've won in their last 8 meetings. And so if they do march into Lambeau and lose, part of me, as much as everybody says that, oh, well, George McCaskey's going to care about that one, he will, but he's also probably realistic enough to know that the Bears have done so much losing in Lambeau that I bet you he'd write it off so long as it's not a complete embarrassment. You know what I'm saying? Like you lose that game 20-23, and I bet the vibes from a 17-37 win at home, where I mean, you had fans chanting to keep Fields.
Yep.
Fans chanting anything. Like it
Yep.
looked and sounded like a European soccer stadium in terms of the fans just inventing new chants left and right. It was awesome. It was
Well, yeah, well,
awesome.
they're not booing. They're not
No.
booing. That's the other thing is like we had some of that early in the year. So there's a few things from the game I want to talk about. So, well, I guess the other part of this we got to celebrate today is getting the number 1 pick. So, like,
Yes.
not only is the team just rising, and it's everyone. It's not just like offense, like defense. Young kids are like thriving. I mean,
Hmm.
Javon Dexter. We'll have to talk about him later. But then you
Oh my
have the
gosh.
number 1 pick, which honestly, the hilarious part was not only did Carolina lose, but the Cardinals beat the
It's
Eagles.
awesome. To be honest with you, like the funniest part about it is so you had this Panthers game that wasn't tense for any other reason than Bears fan anxiety. You had a Bears game that wasn't tense for any other reason than Bears fan anxiety. And then you had this banger of a football game going on in Philadelphia as the Cardinals brought it back. I mean, it's so funny the way the NFL works, man, Nick, because when we are Bears fans, it can be easy for us, especially guys like you and me, where I mean, Flus is still going to have to work. I don't know. I don't want to make Flus out to be more or less than he is. This has been a hell of a turnaround, right? The Bears are 2 historic losses away from leading the division and being, frankly, a better story than the Lions were last year.
Yep.
So, worst case scenario, you could argue that they're kind of in the same boat. And if they
Mhm.
don't draft a running back and if they don't draft a linebacker, they're going to very quickly be in a better boat, I think,
Yep.
than the
Yep.
Detroit Lions, which is
Yep.
wild. But all this to say that, like, it's so easy for us to go, oh, they beat the Cardinals. Who cares? This is the NFL, buddy. Like, I'm guilty of this more than nearly anybody. The Bears could stick with Justin Fields next year, very feasibly win 12 games. Would they go to a Super Bowl? Man, I don't know. Would they win a Super Bowl? Man, I don't know. Out of the last like decade of quarterbacks to win a Super Bowl, it's been all Hall of Famers, assuming you count Matthew Stafford as a Hall of Famer. You may not, right? But so it's like all Hall of Famers and then Matthew Stafford, whatever you want to do with him, and Nick Foles. So the recipe to win a Super Bowl, man, that is a tough rubric, and everybody keeps trying to bring it up, and there's just not enough data. You know what I
Right.
mean? But
Well, it just
a very good team, that's on the table, nearly no matter what you
right.
do.
Right. Well, like, okay, so diving deep into that part of it, I have some other thoughts. Like the obviously Brady's and Peyton's and whomever, like they carry the torch for so long that I think muddies it so much.
It
Like
does.
you have the GOAT. Like you're not gonna have, I mean, again, I'm not one that uses that term
No, 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 no.
loosely.
In the
I don't
last,
use generational loosely or elite loosely, but he was the GOAT. So you look in this like modern era of football right now with the two high safeties, Robert, and quarterbacking. I mean, Mahomes and Allen and Herbert and some of these guys have been struggling so much that you need the supporting cast. It almost makes me wonder if it's a new era because you look at Jalen Hurts made it to the Super Bowl last year, was very close, wherever you are on the PI call. But I mean, that was all they carried more of him, I think, to the Super Bowl than him taking everyone on his back and carrying like some of the other ones have. So like there's a whole debate with that. And I think
of course.
the you can go either way. And I think it's going to be very interesting now with Fields playing better. It makes it more of a conversation because he's not like the 20th, the 25th best quarterback. Now he's working his way towards 15th, maybe 12th. He could be in
Well,
that range. And so if you keep playing like that, it's going to make everything more debatable on Twitter. So again, also people
right.
be more nice on Twitter.
And I mean, God knows that the Fields is like EPA statistics, CPOE statistics. Look, we're a film-based channel here, but
Mhm.
we like to look the numbers in the eyes and speak to them because we believe that if you can't speak to them, then you have a bigger problem. Right, Nick? Like that's how you can miss things, at least in our opinion. But that said, Fields' statistics are going to be a mess because the first part of the season, the later part of the season, and everything in between are kind of just all over the place. Like as
Yep.
much as Nick, I wanted to, because I want to admit something. I caught myself being, I think looking for Fields to have an explicit answer in the Arizona game. Like I think I watched the Arizona film, just looking myself in the mirror, man. Like trying to find the reasons why I shouldn't buy back in. Because
Okay.
at the end of the game, we've got a hobbled DJ Moore and a hobbled Cole Kmet. And really,
Oh,
what is the rest of the team? And would I be holding Joe Burrow to X standard? Would I be holding like Justin Herbert to Y standard if he had nobody around him? Right? Arizona or not. It's easy to say, oh, well, this person would do this. Mahomes' receivers have been negative receivers. Kadarius
yep.
Toney has played for other teams, but it still happened. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like
Well
it's
well, I mean, I would say even, I mean,
it's a
with
weird
as
league.
hobbled as they were and with Tevin Jenkins out, I mean, I would rather have what's around Mahomes than what was on around Fields to the last, what, half of that game.
Gosh, I mean, first of all, that's a big thing to say because what's been around Mahomes has been despicable.
Yeah, but you still
But
have Kelsey
it's
versus Tunyon. You have Rasheed Rice versus Bayless,
so you got the
Tyler Scott.
Kayla or you got the Tunyon part. I agree with you with where
Mhm.
Kelsey, but then you get to like Marquez Valdez Scantling versus a Mooney that man, I don't want to go full tinfoil hat this early in the podcast. This is ridiculous. Do you
You do
think
once per
I
pod,
know.
though.
Do you think that they benched Mooney and called it an injury? Or do you think that
Ooh.
or do you think that Mooney's hurt? Because I'm surprised they called it a concussion, right? I'm surprised that he finished the game. Normally
Yeah.
concussions don't do that. Can't doesn't mean it didn't happen, but him being inactive after last week's game, I'm just saying for a hits-based organization, it would kind of make sense. Because last week's game was loafy, man.
Well, okay, to take that further, I have somebody that should be inactive for next week, and his name is Justin Jones.
Oh
So
man.
we'll get on that at some point.
We'll get
But
there because we
but
do have to work
Rishi
back to the game. I do want to
no,
say
no.
this though. Because you mentioned the too high thing and what that's done for
Mhm,
quarterbacking. You know,
mhm.
it's funny because this is where I feel like we've seen a resurgence in, let's call them backup quarterbacks, right? Guys like Garner Minshew, guys like Jake Browning, guys that just get the ball out to their playmakers have been making hay in the new NFL.
Yep.
But you could argue, Nick, that more than ever, boxes being lighter and DBs sitting in zones downfield means that
This.
Fields is running. does do a lot of damage. And when you're using it correctly, or at least when it pops, Fields is running tilts games that shouldn't tilt it otherwise. And I mean, I
Mhm.
know it sounds hokey. I know it's what everybody has said, but yeah, actually, there's a path to success here if Fields does hit a couple anticipatory shots over the middle. He dumped one to DJ Moore. The DJ turned up field, picked up a first down on 3rd and 7. Earlier in the game, it was like what was it, 1st and 10, and he hits a big dagger shot. But moreover, it looked on time, like very well on
Mhm.
time.
And he missed. He overshot Tyler Scott, but it was the right read, and it was an over route.
Sure, but then you've got tons of these other over routes where it's like you
Mhm,
got crossers against man coverage. It's easy pickings for Justin Fields,
mhm.
and then he nets your offense a free 3 first downs that are just break the glass. This is nonsense. First
Yep.
downs from work in the pocket that should not be. And when you
Mhm.
start adding the value of what those plays give you on offense, you get a 30-point performance against a defense that hasn't allowed 30 points in. I mean, I'll have to look it up, but it's been a hot minute.
Well,
Like
I'm just
37.
I'm proud of you, Robert, because you're coming back towards my area where we're talking about Justin Fields running the ball, and you're okay with it because look at
You
that
have to.
red zone run draw play, which they're going to be in man a lot of times near the goal line, and it was so wide open. A few of these other ones that we're getting first downs on.
Mhm.
I mean, they're even throwing away runs. There's times where he gets -1, -2. It doesn't matter on those because you're going to get the 12, 20-yard runs. Even another 30-yard run got called back today. But again, with those two high safeties, there's less guys in there, and then isolates again. We talked about this in the pre-show. The slow interior linebackers against Justin Fields. It's a mismatch, and it proved it today.
Right. And I mean, I'll tell you right now that what do you do with Fields in the future? Bro, I don't know. Because not only do we get one game, it is so easy for us to do this, isn't it? In all walks of life, where if your brother makes 9 mistakes, but then he does one thing right, you go, man, you rule. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
this is Fields' best game. If we were smart, hey, good news, Bears fans. This is going to get the Washington game back in the conversation because if you're smart, you push the best game out, you push the worst game out. So you get rid of Tampa, you get rid of of this one, and you evaluate the middle. But it's post game pod. We can't do that. We
No, no, no,
gotta
no. We
we
got a lot
gotta
more to talk
talk more
about.
about it. But moreover, to like wonder aloud, like, okay, so we are hitting the point, Nick, where if you asked me today, like, okay, we are drafting quarterbacks in
Mhm.
order to win one football game. Justin Fields is starting to rise way, way up that ladder. How well is he going to survive a full NFL season? I don't know because the longer I keep watching him, the more damage his rushing is doing, the more I want him running the ball, the more he takes 3 to 4 hits a game that make me go, ooh, we did not block that one well, but
Yeah.
I guess that's just how it goes, right? But
Or, or
for
or
the
slapped in the head.
he's never gonna get a roughing call in his life.
He
I mean,
hasn't had one all year. It's a you would think by accident. Taylor Heineke got one today.
Hey,
Looked
at
exactly like
least
the
he
Hail
earned
Mary
it
Cleveland
because he
had.
got smoked in that one. The
So did Fields before the half against
the
Cleveland.
Cleveland one was just ridiculous. But those end of half, okay, so I'm not about to go to bat for officiating. The end of half plays are a massive problem in the NFL right now. I think you've seen it, where it's like PIs down the field, late hits. You can almost feel the referees swallow the whistle and say,
Well,
"Oh, whatever."
you you
Right?
you know who the referee was for that game, right?
Was it the bad one?
It was the one from last night, the same one.
No way.
Yes, it was.
They hopped on a flight and did a second game.
No, 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 no. I'm saying the one in the Cleveland game
Oh, now
that
I
called it
understand.
an
Now I understand.
interception,
I was
that
like,
didn't call the
"What?"
yep, yeah, yeah,
No,
same
but I
refs.
gotcha. I gotcha. And
Yeah.
and like somebody said in the chat here, the worst hits Fields takes are absolutely from whiffed blocking assignments. I just think that whiffed blocking assignments in the run game are kind of a given. They're gonna happen eventually,
Yep.
right? Nobody can hit all their blocks, but man, if we could transition a little bit, am I crazy or is it starting to feel to you like the Bears really are, let's stick to offense, like a center, probably a swing guard, and a second, I'd love a second and third dynamic wide receiver, but let's start with the second one, like away from being a legit stacked out offense.
Oh, yeah. Well, you could say second receiver, and you have Tyler Scott as your third if you improved your backup tight end as well. So you could
And
go either way on that. But yeah,
and
no, I
Kmet
agree with you
is
because
getting better. Komet's
Yes.
looking really good. Didn't see him
Yep.
today, but
Yeah.
over the last couple weeks, he's looking really good.
He is. He is. And well, I mean, give him a little credit on that quarterback sneak. And I've been mad at having a wide receiver there, but he got it done. But no, you're right because, well, Robert, this is the problem is we've been judging Fields off of horrendous surroundings. We know the O line last year. The O line this year has been banged up until the second half of the year, and now we've started to win. DJ Moore is a wide receiver that, a wide receiver one. We've finally seen one. We haven't seen one since I would say Marshall and Jeffrey from back in the day. Like this is what an average surrounding cast is. Now you
Right.
could improve it. You could try to get it to be above average, but I think the other receivers besides Tunyon, or I'm sorry, besides Komet and Moore are well below average. The O line is playing average at best right now, maybe below average on the entire year. Like having just average and judging him. But like that's the problem is it's like, well, he's not as good as insert whatever quarterback. And you're like, yeah, Baker Mayfield has Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. We don't have that here.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think actually that's probably the hardest part about this, Nick. I saw somebody write this up on Windy City Gridiron where they basically made the argument that the Bears were just a little below average. And this is with the loss of Chase Claypool, who it's easy to forget he was ever on the Bears roster, but the Bears did have a legitimate three wide receiver plan going into the season. One of their wide receivers just, combusted, right? He
I
just
was cheering for
imploded.
him too, man. I was
Man,
cheering for him.
so bad the way that that all
Uh-huh.
worked out. But more to say that the Bears tried to build something that was fail proof, and hey, the fail scenario brought them down to below average. You could do worse than that. At no
Yes.
point did we ever get all the way to 2022 bad, but it is easy, isn't it, Nick, that when the pressure starts to turn up on a Bears quarterback and we start to over critique everything, I'm sure
Mhm.
there's somebody out there that wants to move on. And hey, valid option. Right now, I'm going to try to straddle the fence because I don't know, but this is the wrong game to talk about, who. So we're not going to. But moreover, Nick, like it's so easy for somebody who wants to move on at quarterback to look and be like, yeah, but that Tyler Scott over route, you can't miss that. And I'm like, shut up. Like Tyler Scott takes two plays off the board from
I
Justin Fields. You can miss one or two.
I feel like people think that every quarterback or elite, again, elite. I would
Right.
call that top three. Top 10 quarterbacks. They feel like top 10 quarterbacks never miss throws. Go watch Mahomes. Go watch and everyone misses
You
throws,
fan
y'all. This
on
isn't
one now and
exclusive.
again.
Like it's not. So one thing I'd like to kind of transition to would be I I was underestimating what DJ Moore could mean to Chicago coming
Yeah.
here. But on top of that, like how much respect do we have to give him? Because I talked about this in the pregame pod. Playing today after looking like he could have torn up his MCL, high ankle sprain, whatever it was last week. And he has 159 yards on 9 receptions and a touchdown, and he could have had two more. Like, what and again, like pro's pro and like everything. I mean, I remember we were mad at him early in the year. He had some bad body language, but like he's been carrying. And then on top of that, he put that day up when you knew Mooney wasn't there. You Komet like barely played, if anything. What was Atlanta doing in the secondary? Like, dude, just bracket him and then make anyone else beat you.
Look, I first of all, like I'm trying to think of some snarky way to say like just say DJ Moore's out there playing is like not even fair. Dude has another 150 yards. Dude is carrying. And the only
Mhm.
reason he didn't look like he was carrying today, this to me, Nick, this is where football gets so complicated because you have a game like Washington where I think Moore did the yeoman's share of the work on offense. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing to have weapons that can do that. Today, I thought Fields was just threading it. Like it's good on Moore that he kept getting open, right? But I thought Fields carried the load today and got Moore the majority of his production. As well as, hey, little hat tip to a guy that I know a lot of Chicago doesn't like. I thought Luke Getsy's game plan was good today. I mean,
Oh, it's better.
they came out with the plan of basically running a bunch of crossers and pick routes against man coverage, and Atlanta never adjusted. I don't know what they were thinking. I don't know why they thought this was going to work. I don't know what their plan was. We can figure that out on the all 22, but I mean, it was really open all
Well,
day long.
and that's very on Justin Fields, very on DJ Moore, very on Luke Getsy, likely using the middle of the field. This is kind of interesting too. Is and I think this is updated. I just looked it up as we're chatting here. DJ Moore on the season, 1,300 receiving yards, 92 receptions,
Mhm.
8 touchdowns on 130 targets, which I know y'all will be like, man, 130 is a lot. It's not. For a wide receiver one, I mean, back in the day, I think Brandon Marshall had like 180 targets that 1 year in Chicago. So like if you gave DJ Moore
Right.
50 more, like you're doing something. So this guy is efficient. He earns it before. I mean, those veteran moves like you saw, Robert, where he leans in to get that separation late on the sideline, gets his feet down, and sure-handed after the reception, still gaining yards and fighting for some first downs. I mean,
Mhm.
like that one, he was
Mhm.
over the middle, caught it, and just backed up because he knew it was close. Like those are the veteran moves that you need
Let's
to convert first downs and win football games.
let's go through some plays because they are
Mhm.
so much easier said than done. DJ Moore catching the slap fade over the shoulder. That is an absolutely impossible catch. I mean, if you go back and you watch that, because Fields leaves it a single yard short, meaning that DJ is not going to see the ball. Like coming over the top of his head. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like it's just behind him enough to where he's going to have a good idea, but he has to pull his hands out to the spot and just hope it falls there. It did. He catches it, no bobble. Little later in the drive, that those late hands that he displayed in the end zone on a route where he was able to generate a step in the end zone, never easy to do. Hauls that in. A lot of people bobble those, man. Like it is so easy to get on receivers when they drop this stuff, but a lot of teams will blow this. And DJ
Well,
came right through. My favorite play, because it's one of the simplest ones, things feel like they're starting to unravel, right? Just a little. Like you get the Bears, they take a holding call. They're on offense, trying to respond to an Atlanta touchdown drive where Taylor Heineke just ran for 30 yards on you. DJ Moore gets the ball over the middle, stiff arms AJ Terrell, and jogs out a 20-yard first down. For
yep,
what first and 20? It's first and 10. And
yep.
these plays were just so great, like pulling Yak out when he needed it, making complex catches when he needed it. I know that DJ isn't the world's most sudden mover, like when you compare him to Stephon Diggs, etc., but he is such a smooth athlete, and it fits
Mhm.
so well with what Fields does as a passer because he's also an incredibly smooth athlete. It's fun watching the two work together, man.
Mhm. Well, you had talked about, someone that will bobble receptions and they won't come down with them. We have that person in Chicago. His name's Darnell Mooney. So, well, we've seen the other side of it, and it costs touchdowns, it costs games, it costs drives, and it's nice to have that sure-handed. That's exactly what we're looking for, I think. I mean, you think opposite of Moore, in the dream world, you'd wanna have Scott be that, like, speed guy, and
Hmm.
then you'd wanna have a big guy, the jump ball type
Right.
guy. You to have that whole mix, but honestly, I don't care if it's Neighbors or Harrison or whomever else. One other guy to kind of transition other part of the offense we have to give credit to, and people said they saw it last week, and I didn't with Khalil Herbert.
I did.
I didn't see the same burst or the same cutting ability, but he had it today. It was there was more burst, I think, today than last week. There was more cutting ability. And this is what happens when he's healthy. Like we talked about this. The Bears were beat up, y'all, early in the year, and they're healthy now. It's like it's rare to be healthy later in the year. And I can't believe he didn't score that touchdown late and he got the extra carry than that long run. But that is a good we talked about this in the pregame pod. That's a good interior
Hmm.
run defense. It's a good run defense overall, everyone. I think it's second in the NFL. And he had 18 carries for 124 yards and a touchdown. Khalil Herbert, man, hat tip to you today.
Hats off to him. I How much did he get on the long one? Because he obviously
35, I think. 35 or
35 is
36.
great. Most people obviously have a long one. So I don't know. I remember I used to get into arguments online when it'd be like Jordan Howard had 150 yards and somebody would say, yeah, but if you take out the 60-yard run, he was only this. And it was like, all right,
Oh
why are we
man.
doing this? But so for, I love watching Herbert. The guy's like watching a human pinball. I mean, he just soaks contact so much better than I think people think he does because he's not a huge person. He doesn't
Nope.
run with the power that David Montgomery does, at least on first sight. But when people hit him, the guy doesn't go down and he just churns his legs for another 5 or 6 yards. It sure helped that it. I don't know if you saw what I saw, Nick, but first blush, it felt like the Bears leaning on an outside rushing attack.
Mhm.
using crack toss, using plenty of these other things that they had going on, and Fields' legs on like quarterback draw that scored, where he looks as natural as he's going to be. A couple of the other quarterback runs that they had. This stuff lightens the box, opens up seams up the middle, and the Bears capitalized with Herbert, and it was awesome. I mean,
Mhm.
he's just another player that seems like he's playing well. And honestly, at times I feel like I'm living in a parallel universe because I've watched this jersey play so poorly for so long. But right now, I can't help but feel like we haven't even talked about the defense yet. The offense for multiple weeks outside of the Browns game, it's really the only blemish in this, has come out and rocked up 2 to 3 touchdowns in the first half. And even if there are questions about what they're doing in the second half of these games, they're giving the defense quite a lead to defend. And hey, that's a winning formula. Is it going to beat the Chiefs? I don't know, but right now, man, you could tell me that the Bears would pick off pick off Patrick Mahomes 3 times. I would believe you. They're canning 3 interceptions on everybody right now.
Mhm. Well, yeah, well, hold on, one more point about Herbert before I jump to the defense is
Right.
because we always think long term and we think of the big picture, et cetera. Herbert's under contract for next year,
Yes, he
and
is.
you have him and you got Roshan, and that feels like a really good combo that I don't think you really got to mess with. Like you have two cheap guys, you have a speed guy, you got a more of a power guy who can use his hands more. So that's exciting. But to your point about the defense, I had this up, so I'm ready that you read my mind here. The defense had 4 interceptions today, which we were excited about. Again, some of them were just garbage time, but again, that's how you seal the win, right? They have had multiple. So this is 3 or more turnovers forced in 4 straight games. They had none last week against Arizona. Then they had 4 more again today. 5 out of their last 6 games having 3 or more turnovers forced is unbelievable.
I mean, Nick, let's use. All right, so picking on one game is never a great way to build a real case in football, but it's a great way to make a point on a podcast. So I'm gonna do it. Everybody freaked out that Dallas was able to pick off golf. How many times last night? How many times?
Uh,
I'll give you the answer if you don't know.
2 or
It
3? I
it
can't
was
remember.
2. The Bears have picked off Jared Goff 5 times in 2 games and even put him in a headspace where he had one of those Jared Goof fumbles from the other day. Joe Flacco has played clean ball against everybody, except for Chicago, who he played against like at Soldier Field. There's a point where we're looking at this, muttering to ourselves, Nick, Taylor Heineke, did you say he threw 4 picks today?
Yep.
It
No, no,
could
no,
have
he threw 3, Ritter threw 1.
oh gosh. And Heineke had another in him. Like
Yep.
Tremaine Edmonds drops a ball straight through his hands, making exactly the coverage play that we've been looking for him to make literally all season. Like shifting to his right, planting his foot, driving back towards his left, getting into a passing lane, and basically being the guy the quarterback didn't see over the middle of the field, right? Like the shark in the water. This is awesome. This was awesome. I mean, Nick, we hit a point where I put out a tweet which there's a reason I hate using terms like I put out a tweet to make a point, but I was just trying to basically get some cheap engagement off of the fact that I think Ryan Poles made one of the greatest trades in league history at this point. And so originally the tweet stated something like, on a day where DJ Moore had 159 yards receiving and Gervon Dexter had 2 sacks, until somebody pointed out, oh, Gervon Dexter was the Roquan trade. And I went, oh, no worries. Then it's Tyreek Stevenson who had 2 picks. Like everybody right now is playing well. Gordon has a pick. Brisker looks great. Gervon Dexter, 2 sacks, looking
Yep.
like a pass rushing monster.
Mhm.
Montez Sweat looks like one of the best deadline deals in years.
Well, don't tell
Like,
Michael Lombardi.
I mean, what's going wrong here? Where's
I
the
know.
hole? Is it
What
Eddie Jackson? Like, that's one of my
Yeah, yeah.
favorite
I mean,
players, man.
the defense is studly, and I'm like looking back. What was Montez Sweat's first game with Chicago? Was it
So if memory serves, it was the Saints
Carolina
game, wasn't it?
Saints game? Okay, so I'm looking back here. So the last 7 games, Chicago has allowed one opponent to score more than 20 points in the last 7. That was the collapse to Detroit late, and then it was 24 to the Saints, 30 to the Chargers, and then it was 12 to the Raiders, 19 to the Vikings, 20 to the Commanders. So out of the last, I mean, whatever, since week 4, they've allowed 2 opponents to have more than 24 points, one have 24, and the rest have been 20 or less. That's unbelievable. To start the year, remember, y'all, this is the disaster to start the year. 38 to Green Bay, 27 to Tampa, 41 to the Chiefs, and 31 to the Broncos. Since then, they have looked good, and then lately they have looked great.
And it's so funny because again, this is where unless you don't like the Bears defense and unless you're actively trying to make an argument against Matt Eberflus, you can't really use full season statistics because their EPA numbers and et cetera from early in the season are so bad they keep weighting the Bears into the average. Like when you look at them across the whole season, they're not playing average ball. Like if anything, and we are 30 minutes into the podcast, I'm gonna hit you with a take that isn't even hot. It's just the truth. But I think that there are some people, honestly, myself included, that doesn't want to hear this. Atlanta is what a team with a bad coach looks like, and the
Yep.
Matty Eberflus Bears blew them out. I mean,
Yes.
Matty Eberflus may not be the team that we, or Matty Eberflus may not be the coach background that we want him to be. Matty Eberflus may have plenty of things that he has to sort out. I mean, obviously, when you lose what might be both your coordinators that you handpicked, one of them to an HR issue, a second coach on the staff to an HR issue, and all the
Mhm.
other things that we've talked about, blah, 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 over the course of the season. You've heard it before, you get it. Right, Nick? But that there's the problem with offensive coaches being pretty much the only ones who make the playoffs, succeed in the playoffs, at least over history. But this Bears team right now, man, they are fun. And I have no idea how sustainable it is. I really don't know. But it is disgusting looking at how many options there are at adding a second edge. I mean, that's if you don't
Oh,
want to go with like a
lots.
Jared Verse, Dallas Turner, Chop Robinson type. Instead, you could add like a Daniil Hunter, you could add a Bryce Huff, you could add all kinds of guys in free agency or the draft. That and then that could be kind of your one defensive move outside of picking up a safety somewhere. You could push the rest in on offense, add yourself a legitimate bona fide center, find some help on offensive line. You're probably going to pick up a free agent receiver. Like Nick, it is hard for me to not start snowballing saying before we even trade the number 1 overall pick, before we even do anything at quarterback, you can build a real hell of a team because so many guys are starting to rise up and play really strong football
Mhm.
that you say, well, I mean, if Montez Sweat's the best edge rusher on the team, that's probably still a pretty good defense. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I I had fun, yesterday because, we have time off right now with the holidays. I did a fun mock draft where it was defense based, and, I mean, again, I'm not gonna go deep into the weeds here, it's just kinda funny. I traded down twice, from 1, and I got, Jerzon Newton, so you have an interior D tackle, your 3 tech, and then Latu at edge with trading back and getting Max Crosby. And then in the
Oh, that's
early second, I got
disturbing.
and then in the early second, I got Kitchens. I was like, build the elite defense and then just have Justin do whatever he wants to do. So, anyways, it's just fun. But that the fun part is this isn't like one unit is just carrying the other unit. They're both playing
Right.
well. And if you're playing this well, again, with not good edge on the other side and Justin Jones, again, he's going to get my Lucas Patrick comment here. He should get punted into the sun. Like he should not be on this roster. I mean, if wouldn't cost you draft or cap space next week, those 2 penalties were terrible, Robert. You had Atlanta stopped 2 yards short of the first down. And you want to get into an ego trip on the other guy because he hit your guy, which, by the way, I saw a punch thrown by an Atlanta player that didn't get called for penalty or a swing anyway. And who cares, man? Who cares? Scoreboard. That's exactly what you should look to all the time. And that's exactly why, like, getting rid of players, again, the 2 worst guys in the field that played was Patrick and Justin Jones. And like those are like when we're starting to like take out these pieces and we're talking about little things that's going to help Chicago, that's because Ryan Poles has done such a crazy job of flipping this rebuild in such a short period of time. But yeah, like interior pass rush and edge on the other side, like that can get better. But if you're playing this elite and you can have easy upgrades easy upgrades. This defense, as young as it is, I mean, they played well without Jaylen Johnson. It's another thing we need to talk about. If you can do easy upgrades, they could stay good for years.
It sure feels that way, doesn't it? And I mean, Justin Jones has played, I think, better than we basically Justin Jones played the first 4 weeks of the season pretty poorly. And we kind of decided who he was, given that last year was so bad on defense that why would you assume that Justin Jones had any gas in him? The moment that he got into a medium rotation, right, he started playing better. So I have no idea how he played. For me, it is hard to pick up how I just watch all the skill positions. When I'm actually watching the game, I watch the quarterback and the skill positions. And so when it comes to Andrew Billings or Justin Jones, like I'll pick up what they did on all the gritty downs where they didn't literally make the tackle on the all 22 rewatch, right? But yeah, you can't really do that penalty, can you? Like that's the wrong time. That's a game unraveling kind of penalty. And
Well,
so,
and the late hit.
right.
So I from what I had, so he had the unnecessary roughness call when they were short, but he also had the roughing the passer penalty that gave them a field goal. Like you can easily say if we don't mess up our own selves, like Atlanta didn't might not score.
Right. And hey, that's a good thing to be saying. Though I will tell you, you would talk about Atlanta or like us messing ourselves up. Taylor Heineke did not play well either.
Oh, he
Like,
played bad.
we did not beat a Hall of Famer, right? I mean, somebody mentioned this in the chat. They're absolutely right. The broadcast was pointing out open receivers that he was missing. It always gets funny when you're talking about stuff like that because you hope as a defense to create an imposing enough environment that the quarterback feels hurried. And that is exactly what Heineke looked like to me. I don't know what you saw, but he was not camped out in the pocket looking for the open guy, which is a very different story than what we saw early on in the season, where I know you pointed this out with Baker Mayfield, where Baker actually relaxed in the second quarter of the
Yep.
game on, and you saw him go, "Oh, sheesh, it's like I got a red jersey on. Thank goodness." No,
Yep. And no pass rush.
Heineke played like he knew that the offense on the other side was going to snowball him if he didn't make a play, and that if he didn't get the ball out of his hands, he had number 98 coming for him, which
Mhm.
that's what you want as a
Well,
defense.
I'll give him a little credit today though. His scrambling created, I mean, obviously the touchdown, which I was just shocked that that happened, but also multiple first downs too. I mean, early on they were cooking because he
Mhm.
ran. They had two chunk plays of, well, actually they had another one on the next drive. They had three plays of over 20 yards, which I was like, is our defense going to show up? And then they finally did.
Right. It was obviously a weird day to make anything too definitive in terms of claims. I mean, the footing's so bad out there that to
Yeah.
say that, I mean, somebody mentioned, and I hadn't thought about it at all until they said it on the broadcast, that if the ground is icy, and especially if it's snowy, that it's hard to get off of the ball well, which is gonna kill pass rush. And I completely get that. And so it's nice to see that the Bears were able to make do all the same. Felt to me, by the way, we talked about this in our matchup podcast, but I thought Tyreek Stevenson did a great job against Drake London, all things considered, when he got his
Dude, he
opportunities.
is playing great, man.
Oh yeah, like I know it fits my agenda to say it, but it's why I think it's good to just live with a DB's mistakes early in the season because it's kind of like it's kind of like one of those things. You ever been to a science museum? You push the or you put the quarter in the slot and it like rolls around a big funnel and gets closer and closer and closer to the middle before it drops.
Mhm.
DBs, it's just like you're going to fail every which way, and the only hope is that you're getting a little closer to that perfect middle where you're physical but not so physical that you draw a flag and you're breaking on balls but you're not breaking so early that you're guessing and you're getting exposed on the back end of plays, and he hit that balance really really well today.
Yep.
Would love
Yep.
to see him get a safety. I love Eddie Jackson, man, but I do wonder if we could get a better impact player at that spot. But also, it's not like anybody's throwing at him. So I could understand
Well,
it both ways, where the safety you don't see in the broadcast is easy to complain about, but that's what people did for years.
well, I think you can cover that if you get another edge and you generate more of a pass rush, then you can have anybody doing that.
Right.
But no, I mean, the interesting part here is, I mean, not only in the second half, basically was Stevenson and Terrell Smith out there, who I thought played okay as well. Um, I want to talk about Jaylen Johnson because
Hmm.
he made a great play
He did.
to get the stop and then hurt his shoulder.
Hmm.
Now, Shoulder issues have been an issue with him. That was the thing coming out of college, I believe, and um, not being healthy. I want that has to get factored in, man, to this deal.
So it does, right? The problem is that when I went through and I looked at the different corners that you see at the top of the corner market, it dawned on me that corner is such an alien position where the athleticism it takes to survive out there just means that you generally have to be long, but not too thick, because if you're too thick, you're too slow. So you
Yep.
have to be long, you also have to be fast, you also have to be this, you also have to be that. Most of those guys miss like 5 games a year. That doesn't mean that this is a good injury. It just means, like you're talking about, this is something that's going to factor into negotiations. But I would argue, Nick, it's another reason that it's going to come down to the tag. Right now,
Yeah.
Jaylen Johnson has no reason to take any deal the Bears offer him. The moment that he gets tagged, now there's a good reason to take the deal the Bears are offering him, because you get more guaranteed money the moment that you take the extension, even if the AAV is less. We'll have to see what
Mhm.
happens, but like you're talking about, if I was Jalen's agent, I would not say, "Ah, we got hurt in the last game of the season where we got eliminated from the playoffs based on no fault of our own." Ah, that's really gonna kill me in
Yeah.
negotiations. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get it, but I mean I mean availability and depth are huge. I mean that's to winning football.
Absolutely.
So I have a couple other stats here I want to throw your way from the
Let's do it.
game. Again, guys, I always look for the small things. I think that can matter here. So field position is big. Trent Taylor, 19 return yards on punts. I think that's a bonus. Trenton Gill, averaged 48.8 yards per punt
Okay,
today.
we're banging then. All
Okay.
right, Trenton.
Dude, I mean, I wanted that in the Cleveland game. I mean, you did it 2 games in a row. That's nice. Time of possession, Robert. Have you looked this up or no?
No, I bet it was 35 minutes or more.
37-14.
Oh my gosh. That rules. And speaking of
Four.
time of possession, by the way, every once in a while you catch this glimpse. So I don't know if you've noticed this, but when the Bears are running the ball, frankly, even when they're passing the ball half the time,
Mhm.
there was one of those runs in the red zone where it's a screen to Khalil Herbert. He gets hit around a 1 yard gain, battles forward anyways, and ends up face down on the 1 yard line. After like 8 yards after contact, and then you see number 76 just fly into the picture and like knock two guys out. And even better, as one of them's getting or peeling themselves off the like snow-ridden Soldier Field, he is on a knee staring at him. Like, you can go
Mhm.
back and you can watch the broadcast and you'll see Tevin Jenkins basically hunt his prey and make it clear that he knew what he did. And you see this with Darnell Wright. You see this with Tevin Jenkins. I can't believe that we actually are getting a nasty offensive line in Chicago, but we totally are.
I
Like,
know. And
Braxton
like
Joe. Yeah.
I'm just proud of Tevin for as far as he's come. I know he just got injured with the concussion, but like the injuries, but also we might trade him, we might cut him, switching from tackle to guard, and like now he's like one of the best guards in the NFL. Like
Oh, yeah.
that takes something. I mean, if you think about playing tackle your whole life and thinking you're going to get paid so much more at tackle, and to suck that up and to do it and transition from left to right to left as we've been jostling him around, dude, you get another hat tip.
It is hard to look at this team right now. All right, so let's transition a little bit, because it's so funny. This game was so open and shut. There's like not that much to get mad about. You know what I mean? Like, and sometimes the mad stuff is what extends discussion, but instead you and I are both just citing things. The other one goes, "Yep," because it was cut and dry. That's a good thing.
Mhm.
If there's one thing that may not be as cut and dry as I think some fans want to make it, man, there are a lot of football teams that don't seem like they love football this much. Like, there are a lot of teams in the NFL that don't seem like they've got the gas that the current Chicago Bears do. And if, like what Ian Rappaport reported, Flus is down to keep calling the defense, because I don't really want him in a CEO role. I don't see the value there, right? Like, we've got a good thing going. Let's keep it this way.
Yep.
Maybe we add some new stuff on offense. I know a lot of people would love that. I'm very between, because I don't really want Fields learning a third offense. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
extra change is bad, as I see it. It can get better, but couldn't we also theoretically tune up the offense by bringing in a new receivers coach, bringing in a new, like, QC. You get it, right? There's a lot more
Well,
coaches.
or just pure center and wide receiver too.
There's so many more ways to create offensive change than just
Mhm.
firing the offensive coordinator. And if you
Yeah.
do fire the offensive coordinator, you probably should. There are too many issues. It's just a weird time to point it out. Like
Well,
in this game.
two positives. Just more stats. I'm going to throw at you into this offensive
Hmm.
discussion, and one negative. 5 red zone trips today, 4 touchdowns. So
They've
that's hat tip to Getsy. I got to give him some too, and to Fields. 432 yards
mhm.
is outstanding. One negative though, 6 of 16 on 3rd down and 1 of 2 on 4th down.
The Justin Fields, if we could give him some credit for a specific area of the field that he is winning in the red zone. If
Yeah.
for any of the crazy Bears fans and of the people that I imagine are listening and watching this podcast right now, I bet it's quite a few of you crazy sickos. And you probably also double boxed and watched the Jaguars game, right? As they played the Carolina Panthers. And their first 3 red zone trips, they got down to the 10-yard line, worked their way to the 5, and failed. That, Nick, is normal. And the Bears have not run into that problem in weeks. They get down to the 5-yard line. Justin Fields is going to tote the pill and he is going to score. Like, Justin Fields converts trips to the red zone at what feels like an insane rate that I cannot imagine hasn't been consistent through his whole career. Like
Mhm.
it's not just one game or a 2-game sample. It feels as if, Nick, when the Bears aren't moving the ball, they don't move it at all, right? They aren't the offense to get 500 yards and only net 17 points. That just the only game that happened was the Washington game where everything went to hell last year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yep,
Not the most recent one, the one before that
yep.
last year. Normally, if the Bears are getting to the red zone, they'll put 30 on you. They'll put 40 on you. Like they'll
Well,
at least put
and that's
27 on you.
well, you talked that's because of the threat of Fields running. Like, it changes everything because you have to account for that. It gives you better matchups, better spacing, leverage for your receivers, play calls that you can do. It's just different. It's so different than if you had Jared Goff, which Jared Goff has done well most of this year, but he can't run like that. Like,
Yep.
you see running quarterbacks, or the threat of running quarterbacks is so different once you get inside the 10 specifically.
The funny part to me, Nick, is that running as a running quarterback does not need that much. The funny part about Fields is that at times I feel like it can be an embarrassment of riches. He's so fast and accelerates so quickly that he's into the end zone before anybody makes it competitive. The defense at times will just stop trying the moment
Oh
that
yeah.
they see he's about to run into the end zone because there's no contesting it. Drake May, to use an example, or Caleb Williams could probably score a lot of these rushing touchdowns. That's not me trying to draw a direct comparison. It's me pointing out this is why the league is starting to push this way, right? Josh Allen can take a frozen play and turn it into a touchdown. Patrick Mahomes has done it all the time. Jalen Hurts has done it all the time. Lamar Jackson may win MVP partially because of what he's able to do in these scenarios. You get into the red zone, you need that 11th offensive player. You know what I mean? Like, you need that dual threat because it just gives the defense so much more that they have to work through. It is wild watching Fields because Fields is probably as avant-garde a quarterback as you could see, and I really do mean that for those who don't know what I'm trying to say. Fields is very, very specific. Fields is a deep throw machine. Fields is one of the best rushers in football, and he's still coming along as, let's call it, a normalized quarterback, right?
Yeah.
Or right, Nick, like an NFL passer, so to speak. But the old way of doing things, he was an explosive play in a bottle. And you see that at times, even in today's game. And gosh, if you can just access a little more of that, keep the
Mhm.
chains moving this way, that way. I mean, for crying out loud, the chemistry he's developing with DJ Moore, the trust, dare I say it, makes you wonder like, okay, if we do get Malik Neighbors, if we do get Roma Dunze, God forbid we get Marvin Harrison Jr.,
Brock Bowers.
can you get 2 of these? Man, the only thing about the Bowers thing is that the day that a team commits 2 major resources to tight end for the betterment of the team, I will believe it. I will get right there with you. I don't
New
trust.
England did with Gronk and Aaron Hernandez, man.
And then it did. That one failed for reasons completely
Well,
outside of their
that's
control.
but on the field, it worked.
I
It was nice.
right.
I mean, the benefit to 2 tight ends is that you don't know if it's run or pass. But to your point, a couple of things. One is that Fields did today. When you get in the 10 and inside the red zone and your guy can run and then run to throw, which Fields did today to Tyler Scott.
He did.
Like, and we saw last week when Mercedes Lewis was wide open because the guy has to come at Fields. He's like, oh, yep, wide open. Boop. Like, that's such a different thing. And the other thing is this, I hear this often, right? Well, if you get more weapons, it won't change because, Fields is so limited. Can he support weapons? Did you see him in college? He had weapons and he just is like, "Yep, you're open. Boom, 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 boom." And he made them all eat. He's like, "Yep, I don't even need to run." We didn't know he was this good of a runner because he's just like distributing everywhere. So
The
I agree with you. If he can a little bit more on time, which he's getting better at, throwing over the middle, which he's done better the past few games, and eliminate some of these negative plays. That was one of the things, Robert, I wanted to dive into was the
Mhm,
sacks that he took. So
mhm.
there were three. So one was when, and again, I want to get into this because you can hear on the audible, and he's there's a blitz coming, and he says Lucas. Okay, me as an offensive guy, there's Lucky, there's Ringo, whatever. Lucas isn't a call. Lucas is his name. Lucas. Get the linebacker. Lucas goes left and doesn't get the linebacker. To me, that was not a left call. To me, that was Lucas. That's your guy. Mike, Lucas, not shifting left. I think that was an MI, which is missed assignment by Lucas Patrick. That was one sack, and Fields could do nothing there. The second one, I wanted to get into this because I wanted to hear your angle on this, Robert.
Yeah.
So right before the half,
Mhm.
and Cairo Santos then missed the field goal and they almost returned it. And I had for those that remember this, Bears fans, I had the Devin Hester field goal
Yes.
return, or further back, the Nathan Vasher
Man.
against the 49ers with the
No,
wind,
these
if
were
y'all remember that
awesome.
one. And I had that one going through my head. I can't believe that we tackled him. But Fields dropped back, rolled left,
Mhm.
and then slid and got a sack of 2 yards instead of throwing it away. And then they took the timeout with 4 seconds left. Was that designed? I took this that was a designed thing just to drain clock if the guy wasn't open and then
I
kick the field goal.
So I took it as just a coaching point, which kind of is the same thing, sort of, where I think Fields was legitimately running for yardage, but he was going to get down wherever he was going to get down because they
Mhm.
were trying to wind the clock. Where if you didn't, like you're saying, if you didn't get the open shot you wanted, that you were going to make sure you went down in bounds so that you did not give give Atlanta any chance to really do anything with it. Now you still
Mhm.
did, and I
Right.
can't, and I know that we've given him a lot of grief, but Lucas Patrick did a good job staying competitive in that play. Like, I thought Lucas Patrick, wild as it was, working all the way back to like the 30-yard line, getting in the way, forcing a cut, and then even getting his left hand on the guy's
Yep.
shoulder helped do just enough to help somebody else
And it
go
was
catch a guy.
and I when I watched the replay, I'm like, "Oh, horse collar," and then it wasn't. So he did enough to tackle, not the horse collar,
Right.
which would have been a field goal. So yeah, I'll give him that credit. And then the last one was the play action with just over 2:01 left on the clock. That one's on Fields. So I would say
Yeah.
one sack today was on Justin.
And I mean, I agree with you. Like, I'm not trying to push for sacks. It's funny you talk about the pocket passer thing in college. I feel like so there's a lot of people that want things to be really final, right? It's just never this easy, because you mentioned Fields was a pocket passer in college. Fields was a pocket passer in college. He really never had to work to his second read, though. He could be a pocket passer as a one read player because you could identify Chris Olave pre snap. And if you didn't like Chris Olave's pre snap matchup, well, here's Garrett Wilson. Like,
Mhm.
if you or there was a brief time where he could move to Jackson Smith Jigba. His tight end was Jeremy Ruckert. Like, he had NFL dudes
He had
across
Jameson Williams too.
yeah. I mean, no, that's Alabama.
No, he had him he was
Oh,
at Ohio State.
was that back or then he transferred to Alabama? There you go.
And Najigbo barely played with Fields. It
I
was
know.
mainly
I
it was
know.
mainly Olave,
And Wilson.
Wilson, and then
I'm pretty sure there was a third
somebody
one.
else.
I just always throw JSN in there for fun.
Well,
Uh,
he was a redshirt freshman, had like 15 catches. It was
right.
Jameson Williams he caught one of the touchdowns in that big game against Clemson. But I'm with you. But Chicago can create that.
And
You could have
yes,
Harrison and Moore and
that's what I'm
like, you
trying
can
to
make
get
that.
to. right? Is it's like there's going to be we have to I think this is important to talk about. Like there are going to be parts of Fields' game that I really don't know how much, let's call it classically better, they're really going to get, right? But you could run a one and done matchup based offense feasibly if you had 2 to 3 matchups that you really, really liked, or 2 to 3 weapons that you liked using, where you could say, okay, all we really need you to do, Fields, is go one, maybe 1 to 2 at times. And just if you don't like it, get off it because the other guy's probably going to get better. And then if you don't like either of those, go ahead and run. Like you could probably imitate a lot of this. Now, would you end up with a 5,000-yard passer? I don't know, right? But you definitely are going to get more value out of a Marvin Harrison Jr. than you're going to get out of a Darnell Mooney. Now, would you get more out of Marvin Harrison Jr. if he was somebody else, or if he was somewhere else? Nick, who cares? That's the hard part about this, right? It's like we can try to take Justin Fields and say, oh, well, what if he was Josh Allen? He's not literally Josh Allen. Like he's
Mhm.
Justin Fields. There's a point where these players are their own guy. And for better or for worse, at times they are who they are. Justin Fields is going to get you in his best games 3 to 5 first downs that you shouldn't get with anybody else. Like
Yep.
Taylor Heineke ran the ball and reminded everybody of what a normal NFL quarterback looks like, and he's considered athletic. Like that's an
That is
athletic
true.
quarterback
Yep.
in a lot of cases. And
Yep.
so when Justin Fields is able to get out of these sacks that should not be, the one where he broke 2 tackles, I mean, come on,
Yeah.
like that is alien
Well,
stuff. That's
you know
superhero stuff.
it is, and you know the other part too is once they fix center, which again almost anybody could fix center in this offseason because I mean, it doesn't take much to go up from 32 or 31. Um, Once they fix that, Robert, you see this with defensive with the edges. Is they're like, hey, let's just contain this crazy superhero, whatever, right? There's going to be less pass rush because a lot of the pass rush comes from the interior, from the middle, from Lucas Patrick going the wrong way. If you
Right.
can just have average center play, I think it changes a big dynamic because Fields does like to hold on to the ball. He does hate interior pressure. If you can change that, he hated that in college too. If you can change that, I think it's going to change a lot. Here's a couple of things, and we hear this debate often, and then we can probably get off the Fields thing if you want. But between Caleb or Drake May, which I'm open to either at this point, or Fields, is the differential between them and what could be at that quarterback, right? Worth, because people talk about money, and I don't think the money matters because it's a 3-year gap between paying someone an extension. And in that 3 years, let's say you get roughly 3 first round picks. Let's just say 3 first round picks. Okay.
Hmm.
They're going to be cheaper
Hmm.
than signing DN, safety, receiver, whatever, right? So the money you save there kind of already equates to that, in my opinion. And they'll be on those cheap 5-year deals. So is the differential in the quarterback worth the 3 upgrades that you could have otherwise? Plus, you have to talk about hit rates, right? The
Right.
hit rate of quarterback, right? For a hit rate of 3 other players. So, like, you already know Fields is not bust. Is he going to be 5,000-yard passer? I don't know. But if he's quarterback 12 and you upgraded 3 other spots, is that worth it to you plus the locker room? And that's the debate.
The locker room's a big one. I mean, like you mentioned this. I mean, this plays perfectly into where I was going to go with this, which is like in Madden. I think this makes a lot more sense than in real life, where it's way muddier on both sides of this. Like in the pro Justin Fields side, the locker room thing matters. You could say it doesn't matter. It matters a lot. Uh, on the other side of things, Nick, I don't think there's a world where Justin Fields, you pick up his 5th year option, he's going to amicably play through the tag, right? Like the 3 years of control without an extension that people have talked about. I don't think that's going to happen. He's got David Mulgeta representing him. Like he's going to get his money, especially because if you traded the first overall pick twice, you obviously committed to him, and
Yeah.
he's going to have all kinds of leverage. Are these bad? It's not. It's not explicitly bad, right? Like it's does this mean that it can't work? Absolutely not. The other thing, like everybody talks about how you need to just keep taking swings at quarterback. Nobody does. Let me use an example. If the Bears traded back in the first round and then they picked up Bo Nix as insurance, well, now Bo Nix is kind of the guy. I mean, the Packers didn't take anybody other than Sean Clifford during the Jordan Love, like Aaron Rodgers tenure, and even the Jordan Love pick was criticized to no end because you basically wasted a pick for 3 years. Like, Nick, there's no world where you take Caleb Williams and you don't give him a 4 to 5 year run. But at the same time, if you took a JJ McCarthy or you took a Shadir Sanders or you took a Quinn Ewers, should he declare like later in the draft, they get the same run. Like,
Yep.
there's not really a world where you get a quicker hook on somebody who's taken in the second round or higher. And I say all this to just basically say this thing is going to be complicated as hell.
It
Like,
is.
there are so many hooks in this. Do you think what Justin Fields is doing is replicable? What is he saying in the meetings? What's he doing on the practice field? Do you think that this can be sustained, or do you think that he just played a hell of a game at the right time in the middle of adverse weather conditions? Who's to say? His ball cut through the snow, that sticks out because a lot of guys don't, right? But what's going to happen next week? I bet that weighs pretty heavily on George McCaskey's mind. But man, Nick, uh, we've been talking about how positive things are, and they still are positive. But for the first time in weeks, I'm really going to say, like, actually, I don't envy Poles' decision at this point because it feels like there's 5 to 7 ways to be wrong, at least in the eyes of the media, right? You may make the objective. Let me use one more example, and then I'll hand it back off to you, right? Ryan Poles, if he cares about Twitter, took a beating from Twitter for about 27 games over the George Pickens thing, right? And then George Pickens becomes a problem in the locker room, and he also catches for 200 yards a couple weeks later. So it's still kind of back and forth. With Jalen Carter, you end up with very similar stories where people are saying, "Oh, well, they should have drafted this," but actually there are these problems that nobody would ever know about. They would never know about these problems. But this is something the GM had to consider. With the quarterback, with all of this, I have a feeling it's going to come down to all kinds of intangibles. I also think it's going to come down in part, not that anybody wants to admit it, to the bidding war that happens for Justin Fields services. If the best offer you get is a third round pick, but you can get you can get 3 firsts and Terry McLaurin to move down like 2 slots when all is said and done. Well, that's awfully tempting. On the other side, if the best you get is 2 firsts coming down from, and that's just 2 firsts, like this year's first and next year's first, to move down a couple slots for number one, I don't know why you would. You shouldn't. But if that was the case,
Yep.
and on the other side you get a first and a second for Justin Fields, then that changes the math. It's all going to be messy, and the best part about it all, Nick, is that you and I and any other fan, we're just never going to get enough information to accurately say whether it's a smart move until like 3 to 4 years after it have played out.
Mhm.
But it should
Mhm.
result in more Bears wins, and that's all I'm
Right.
looking for.
Here's the good news, y'all. One is, and I think Robert's on the same page that I am. I trust Ryan Poles. He early on, Byron Pringle, Lucas Patrick, Justin Jones, the signings, the Larry Okunjobi disaster. Ugh. This year, you're seeing those guys, the draft picks develop, the signings, the trades, all of it come together. I mean, Claypool, you could add into the negative. All that coming together, you can see the plan. I trust him. I would be okay with Fields. I'll be okay with Caleb. I'll be okay with May. I haven't looked enough at Jaden Daniels at this point. But the point is, it's a good problem to have because
Very
if
good.
you do trade Fields and you reset, then it there's enough belief from Ryan Poles that this is the next whatever it could be, right? And you get some good capital from Fields. Or if you move on, then they have enough from in the locker room, being with Fields for 2 years, this staff, this GM, Kevin Warren for 1 year, that they believe in Justin Fields. And so either way, it's good. The Bears should have 9 or 10 wins right now with the current roster. Then they may not. We'll see. I think they're at 10 right now. Let me check Tankathon. They're the 10th pick.
But to
They
back
could
up,
have
to b-
two top 10 picks or all of the draft capital that goes with get trading down from one or getting Justin Fields. You're going to add so much more to this roster. Things are looking up in Chicago. A few weeks ago, with how Fields was playing, it didn't look like it was as much of a conversation, Robert. We've kind of talked about that.
right,
Now it does. Like, this is good no matter what. It ups his
look,
draft capital or if he stays.
you
It's
want me to
good all
be
the way around.
you want me to be like really, really shrewd, Nick? I could make an argument. All right, so using 2 football games that are happening right now, because they're like still happening, right, is not great analysis. But I want to make my point. So I'm gonna go ahead and do this. Right. Uh the Geno Smith Seahawks are now down at home to the Mason Rudolph
Oh,
Steelers.
just tied it.
Well, there you go. But either way, it's a split game. I still get to make my point because people would say that there's an obvious quarterback drop off, and yet the game's tied. Weird. On the other side, like a little further away in the country, you've got the Kansas City Chiefs, who you could say easily have the best quarterback in football, right? You could even say their whole offense is supported by the best quarterback in football. They are losing to a backup quarterback that has, granted, I think Jake Browning's playing really, really well, but
At
that's a
home.
well built team and they're losing in Arrowhead. Like you could, if I was going to be very shrewd, but also make your point, Nick, there could be a real conversation where just for all the people that are terrified about what Justin Fields may be or not be because you know he gets hurt, you bring in a premium backup quarterback to run in the future with a team that you feel like if you end up with a Jake Browning scenario where you need to play, I don't know, let's just use Gardner Minshew as just a silly placeholder, right, Nick? That you're sitting there thinking, okay, with DJ Moore, with Marvin Harrison Jr., with Brock Bowers, and with Cole Kmet, and also with Chris Jones on our defensive line, like I'm not worried should Justin Fields get hurt about us continuing to win. And if you wanted to
Exactly.
build that team, I totally get it
Yep.
because it does kind of feel like I don't know. It's there are so many ways to be wrong. The
Mhm.
this latter one, like the build the better team one, feels so comforting, but it has
It
not
does.
gotten the 49ers into the Super Bowl since Jimmy Garoppolo made it. What was that? Like 4 years ago? They keep finding ways to lose in the AFC Championship game. I think it's the AFC. I get AFC
Well,
NFC confused
tearing
all the
your
time.
UCL really hurts as
Of course
well.
it does. Bad stuff happens, right?
Yeah. I mean, to me, like, I think people
Winning a
focus
playoff
so much.
game would be a great turn for Chicago, and I
Yeah.
have to keep reminding myself of
And I think
that.
people like always think of like, okay, who won the Super Bowl? And this is to win a playoff game, to win the Super Bowl, lots of luck has to happen. Eli Manning has
Tons.
two, and they had no business winning two. Nick Foles won one. They had no business winning one, and they beat the Bears in 2018 on the road in the wild card game. They had no business doing that, or the divisional game. Like there, to me, I think part of it is let's build this team, whichever way. I'm okay with either way. I trust polls to get into the dance, which is the playoffs, and then you never know what happens. I mean,
I mean,
Chicago with a really good defense back in the day and a run game and Rex Grossman beat the high flying Saints offense in the NFC Championship game. And they smacked them. You
okay,
don't know what it's going to take, honestly.
okay, okay. I'm going to present you a choice. I'm going to present you a choice that I think is very on the nose. Okay. Option A, you trade back number one, and I guarantee you that you're going to have at least two playoff wins over the next 4 years, right? And you have a 75% shot at a very good football team, whatever you decide that to be, right?
Mhm.
You can pick your own representative. You are risking that Fields may never be that guy, right? But you are going to win a lot of games. On the other hand, you have a 50-50 shot. This is going to be a very, very high odds, which I'm making on purpose, right? So maybe we'll go 40-60 shot. You have a 40-60 shot to make the Super Bowl with the other option. Maybe the first option, it's only 15-20%. Ride with me for the sake of comparison. But you have a much higher chance of the whole thing failing and the team never even being like medium good, right? Than being like kind of fun, but ultimately not good. Whatever you think the current Jags are, but that's like the peak and then it falls off from there.
Yep.
Would you take the one that gets you more wins, even if it gimps your chance at a Super Bowl a little bit, just because of how bad the last 10 years of Bears football have been and how, frankly, comforting it would be to have maybe 4 to 5 seasons where who knows if your quarterback's the best? Why does that matter? Like your team is dominant. You feel like you can root for things that aren't tanking, like as early as October. Wouldn't that be great? To like still
Mhm.
think about the division race and all the other things that go into that. You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
Like, would you take the first option, even if maybe in theory it lowers your chance at a Super Bowl? And it doesn't necessarily.
My decision, and again, that's without knowing all of the trade parameters, whatever.
Right.
My decision would be the first one. And this is partly because I haven't been like blown away on the film that I've seen of the quarterback prospects to think that the differential is Hall of Famer to quarterback 15 to 20 in the NFL. Like, I don't think that's the differential. I'll say that right now. I need to watch more.
Sure.
So in my mind, let's make the team better. And if the Super Bowl chance is a little bit less, it's sure enough better than being a bust and the whole team falls apart.
That's the thing, right? Because I don't blame anybody for saying, because here's the other thing that I almost feel like we can add to this, right? If you're the biggest Fields supporter out there, you probably admit that while Fields seems to be getting better, we've been through this before. We thought he was getting better at the end of 2022. We felt like we took some steps backwards in 2023 for good reasons. I'm not trying to pile on. I'm more trying to point out that there's risk of what does any of these or what do any of these quarterbacks look like in 2024 and beyond. But if you told me, Nick, that you were definitely much surer of what Fields wasn't going to be, like in
Mhm.
terms of how bad it could get, and that was a comfort, I do get that. I
Yeah.
mean,
Right. And that's the tough part because we don't know how Justin Fields is in the NFL with an average offensive line
right.
or average weapons. We don't even know that
Well,
yet,
we're
much
pretty
less
sure that this
much less the
offensive line
pass.
is average, don't you think? Do you think it's below average?
I would right now average, but you would take this whole season when you didn't have Braxton Jones for a long portion, Tevin Jenkins for a long portion. You'd have. Let's go back and remember the Lucas
So
Patrick, Cody Whitehair days.
that's where I would argue that this is where like the conversation just comes down to what are we saying to each other,
And no Nate
right?
Davis.
Because if I applied the same injuries the Bears took to any offensive line in football, I think we're going to mangle them too, right? We're going to be down our left tackle immediately. We're going to be down our left guard immediately. Our right guard is going to be down also. And like we have issues at center. So
Right.
we got two guys playing hurt. We've got three guys that are
Yep.
out. Like if
Mhm.
I smacked that on the Chiefs, if I popped that on the Eagles, if I put that on the Niners, they're gonna have issues too. So is it an average offensive line room? I think it kind of always was. But to your point, like you had offensive line issues that the Bears offensive staff was certainly not sorting out. And I don't want to hold that against Fields one way or another,
Right.
especially coming off of the best game of his life. I
Yeah.
mean, I think
Yeah.
so.
I mean, it's up there. I mean, you go back to last year, you think of like the Lions game, you think of the Miami game, you think of Washington and um, Denver this year. Like he's putting together some stuff, man. I again, and I don't know right now that with a better line and a wide receiver two with a pulse, it feels like at some point that he couldn't be top 10.
What bugs me about what you just said is that you don't need to trade the number one overall pick to get that. Right?
No, no.
There's just the littlest false equivalency that we see in the conversation where people say, "Yeah, but I want to get a second wide receiver." And I'm like, "You can."
Yeah, you can.
At this point,
You can.
you should be able. I mean, worst case scenario, you end up with Roma Dunze, who could absolutely toe tap in the end zone for that ball that Tyler Scott didn't
Yeah.
haul in. I don't know if he's separating all the way down, but he'll open up other options for you.
I like Tez Walker quite a bit. You
Right.
could go Vlad McConkey if
Tons
you
of
want to get
ways you
that
could go.
slot. Yep.
Tons of ways you could go. The
Mhm.
trading down is to give you an embarrassment of resources, right?
Yes.
You
Another
still
edge.
you
Yep.
still get, and this is the part that I think gets really screwy, Nick. You still get one shot at a new quarterback. Like
Mhm.
you're not going to you're not going to get 6 first round picks over the next 3 years and use one on Bo Nix and then one on another prospect 2 years later unless Bo Nix is just terrible. And I'm using Bo as just a name to bring up.
Right, yeah. Yep.
That's not
I
my
get it.
guy,
I
right?
get it.
Um, Instead, you're going to get Jared Verse when he does the thing that Miles Murphy did and drops a little bit further than people expect him to, right? The whole edge to run defender. I'm just saying, this sounds like the ideal pair for Montez Sweat if that's where you wanted to go.
I like Dallas Turner, man.
I like Dallas Turner a lot too. And Latui Latu is the better edge rusher. But I'm thinking out loud about like which one could be an edge to day one that then grows into a really dangerous edge to. And
Right.
I think Verse makes a lot of sense there, but that's me trying to think out what the Bears need and what they want from Flus. But it's all to say that like you're gonna get a gross supplement of receivers. You're gonna get,
Yeah.
chances are, like a premium offensive lineman probably next year if you don't add a couple premium defensive linemen. Like, and then you could add a corner. You could add this. You could add that. I'm excited, to be honest with you, because at the end of the day, Nick, we can take a step back. We can take a deep breath and say, whatever Ryan Poles decides, right now he's cooking with gas.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well,
hand him the
imagine if
baton.
Carolina was pick 6 right now. We'd be like, "Oh, thank goodness. Fields looked good today," right?
If honestly, just let's be so real. Fields has done enough to be relatively inspiring. It is easy to oversell how bad the season has been. It hasn't been that bad. It's just been worryingly similar in certain ways to things that were in 2022, but worrying, not like clear cut. You know what I mean, Nick? Because
Mhm.
the offensive scheme decayed. There are all kinds of injuries. DJ Moore is on pace for the best season of his career. A quarterback's supposed to spike a wide receiver one's production, isn't he? So
Mhm.
you start looking through Cole Kmet having the best season of his life at the
Yep.
same time. I mean, these arguments for isn't Fields showing you something? Yeah, he's been showing us something. The question was always, is it enough compared to number one? If we had pick number 6, we'd be saying, heck yeah, like we're going to get Malik Neighbors. It's a done deal.
Yep.
And then with a second pick, we're going to get this, that, or the other.
Mhm.
Where we would still be talking about pretty much building the same team that we've been talking about, but the ceiling would be just a smidgen lower, right? We'd be basically trying to build a better version of the current Browns. Is that
Yeah.
even bad? Like that
Well,
that's kind of
well,
fun.
but see, so, like, the thing is you take that Browns team, they thought Deshaun Watson would be the Patrick Mahomes on top of that team. Like, that's
Right.
that's the whole thing is, like,
Right.
because there is this chance that it doesn't really work out, but we're getting so far into the weeds, Robert. I'm happy
We really are.
Carolina lost. I'm happy Arizona won. That just makes it even more sealed because with Arizona winning, Robert, that pushes back the Marvin Harrison conversation. You can move back to 2 and get him or 3 and potentially still get him. And the Bears crushed today. Like the other thing that's impressive about Chicago today, Robert, is they had the hot start, which they've had often, but then they closed it. They scored in the second. They
Yes.
scored 16 points in the second half on top of the turnovers. Like it was like the most well-rounded win that
Right.
they've had. Instead of us hanging on because for a second, Robert, it creeped into everyone's mind of,
Oh yeah.
"Oh no, here it goes again." And then they slammed the door shut like a good team does, which
I can't
is
help but
awesome to see.
think I can't help but think that the hardest part about coaching is how do you maintain the lead? Like the Bears are not so good at running the ball that they can just run their normal offense. And I mean, if anything, Nick, you could argue that that's been part of the whole shift in current football, right? Like in 2015, you need to plan around being down in the fourth quarter. So you built your whole offense on throwing the ball. And a lot of those teams struggled to maintain leads. Now you've got the Niners. That team is built to maintain a lead. Like
Yes.
it
Yes.
when they've got a lead, they're going to run their normal offense because that's just what they do. How are they
Yep.
going to come back in the fourth? Trick question. They don't. Like they showed Kyle Shanahan and his record when he's down, what was it, multiple scores in the fourth quarter? And it was like, oh, we just don't win these games. We're like 0 and
Mhm.
40 when we get into that
Yep.
situation. But everything comes at a cost, right? And so the neat part to me when I look at the Bears going forward is that there's so many different ways that they could go with this thing. But I do think Fields is always going to give them a box edge if they do stick with Justin. I think that the talent they can add to this team, man, Nick, this could just get really fun in a hurry. They've got good DBs. Terrell Smith, like I give him a hard time because everybody likes to make the comparison. No, I mean he can play. Like it's not Kindle Vildor situation, right?
Who
And
made a play today, by the way,
he
or
did.
yesterday?
It's
I was like, "Oh, look at him."
look at it, look at him all growing up, right? It's
I'm so proud of him making a play. I mean,
I
and like, and here's the fear I think that people have
mhm.
is you stay with Fields, he doesn't improve, and the team around him doesn't make it work. Like for example, right now, y'all, quietly, the Philadelphia Eagles have lost 4 of their last 5 games, and part of that is Jalen Hurts got paid.
I
And
was
then they
gonna
lost Javon Hargrave. Then they lost TJ Edwards. Then they lost some of that supporting cast around them. But I don't think Chicago can do that because they have the draft picks right now. And I don't think Justin Fields is going to command the contract Hurts did.
I kind of think that's the only contract. That's not me trying to dunk on Justin. Like I
I don't think
promise
so.
I'm not boxing anything into some corner. It's more like I think you got the Jones extension as a floor if you're extending him. I do think chances are, Nick, best case scenario, you're sticking with Fields, you're picking up his fifth year option, and you're saying we'll figure it out at the end of the season, and that's that, right? And then at the end of year four, you're either extending him or you're trading him for markedly less than you would get this
Well,
offseason.
part of it is that they could, okay, like if let's say Daniel Jones extension plus whatever 5-10% is what is offered this offseason
Hmm.
because of the growth, right? And he's like, I want more than that. He could want to play on the fourth year and fifth year option to increase his price tag too. Like that's a whole part of this conversation. He could be
Right.
like, I don't want to play it because I know I'm worth more than 45 a year.
He totally might. I mean, I would be shocked if I was him. And I don't know. This is where us and relating with athletes gets so funny, right? Because
Right.
if I got offered 45 million a year, given or given the career that he's had, and especially because like you gotta know that there's this nagging voice in Fields' head thinking, well, I could tear my ACL at any point.
Right.
Like, I mean, what happened with Kyler? Like, Kyler got paid, let's say, a season too early. Good for Kyler, bad for the Cardinals, right?
Mhm.
And so,
Mhm.
either way, I'm not, I'm not worried. Like I think the Bears will handle this. I'm Games like today are just so much fun to get to talk through because at the end of the day, Nick, if you told me that I'm cheering for a team built very similarly to the Cleveland Browns, but not with somebody like Watson at quarterback, explicitly, like not the off-field questions. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
Right.
Okay, I'll rock with it. Right?
Mhm.
I actually think that maybe it is me having spent so long with the Bears being so bad, where I've been waiting for the star quarterback that was going to turn this team around and make it a consistent winner. And you probably do. I mean, in many ways, a Hall of Fame quarterback is going to do a lot for your team. Like, let's not downplay the
Yeah,
significance of
obviously.
the position.
Yep.
But a Hall of Fame quarterback might mean you're the Chargers if things go really wrong, right? A Hall of Fame
Mhm.
quarterback might leave you scrapping to get into the playoffs, which the Bills have pulled off. Good for Josh Allen, right? But you could build a really good team that's going to win a lot more games than the Bears have. And it may not be, let's say, the preferred option, but I can absolutely see the like chicken noodle soup, like when you're sick, comfort of next year we are going to beat the Packers. We are going to beat the Lions. We are going to beat the Vikings. And we are going to see what happens in the playoffs. And speaking of, the Bears get the opportunity. Has it connected to you that the Bears can kick off 2024 with the only win that matters?
What's that?
Beating the Packers.
Oh, 2020. Well, and I know this isn't the preview show, and I'm sure we're going to end this soon, but I mentioned this before, Robert. The Bears played the Lions and fell apart. The second time they played the Lions, they won.
Mm-hmm.
The Bears almost Bagent threw that bomb to DJ Moore and underthrew it. Remember, right? At
Yep.
Soldier Field, lost to the Vikings. Second time they played them, beat the Vikings. Lost to Green Bay. First game of the year. Terrible. Let's not think about it too much. Second time they play Green Bay is next week.
Mm-hmm.
And the Bears are going like this right now. And Green Bay's
I have a weird question for you, Nick. I thought Bryce Young was playing well. He hung 30 points on the Packers defense. How did Bryce Young in that offense look against Jacksonville?
dude, the Packers defense looks like trash right
So
now.
bad.
And Jair Alexander, like we talked about this, I don't know what's happening with him, whether he's going like Antonio Brown status with I don't know what's going on, but if he doesn't play next week too, that was with him playing some of the games too. With
Right.
him not playing,
This could be
let's
fun.
go.
This could be
Let's go.
really fun. And we'll see. I mean, far be it from me to gas a bunch of Bears fans up about the Bears playing in Lambeau to end the season. This has gone well. Never. But if we take from history, Nick, and we think about this, what is it? What does it seem awfully similar to that happened last year? You get what I'm
Oh,
you get what I'm saying?
Detroit for sure.
Doesn't it?
Eh,
Doesn't it?
so one thing to keep in mind too, though, I mean, what if that game ended up being who wins gets in the playoffs because Tampa lost today.
Mm-hmm.
Seattle, who has the other wild card. Oh, I'm sorry, the Rams won. Seattle, again, score update live for y'all that are here. people that are listening to this later on to be like, different score. 24-17, Pittsburgh is up with the ball and they're driving. So things could align where it's like that week 17 game in Chicago where Chris Conte, didn't convert. Well, sorry, Julius Peppers missed Rodgers and then Chris Conte didn't, you know, play the ball well. That could be fun next week.
It's so funny looking at this Bears season because we've gotten cameos from everybody, right? Chris Tabor takes over the Carolina Panthers and does not markedly change anything. Thank you, Chris. Right? We had Andy Dalton, who apparently psyched Bryce Young up that when Bryce Young seemed as if he hurt his back there in the early part of the game, I'm going to attribute it to Andy that he got Bryce back into the game instead of finishing out the game himself. Thank you, Andy. Right? Mitch Trubisky got New England and Arizona key dubs that kickstarted what ended up becoming 4-win campaigns. Thank you, Mitch. It's only fitting that Mason Crosby, if that's who was doing the kicking, shanks a 54-yarder to keep the Giants from beating the Rams and all but officially eliminate the Bears from the playoffs. But I will live with it because the season that the Lions are watching, I know just enough Lions fans personally to see what this has meant to them. And my hope would be the Bears could have a very similar season next year. Now, we've been through this before. We had the Bears 100 season, and I don't really want to talk about it. To be honest with you.
Well, I mean, also just talking about Detroit moving forward, who would be, you'd think, the biggest, opponent or toughest person in the division. We've seen the Eagles struggle without their coordinators. Losing Ben Johnson in that offense could be a lot bigger than people want to talk about.
I still think that Detroit built for now as opposed to the future, and I think that roster is going to decay. I mean, that's not me being a Bears fan either. I think that this draft was their opportunity to add some guys that
You
would
can't go
be
linebacker, running back in round one.
linebacker, running back. They took a 25-year-old quarterback with an ACL problem, and they took Brian Branch and Sam Laporta. And shocker, those two have been awesome. Like, imagine 3 more of them. But they don't have that, do they?
Nope.
Instead, they've got Amon-Ra St. Brown. They've got Sam Laporta. They've got a drop-off. And then Jameson Williams fits in that other category. Oh, and they have a quarterback problem that they don't seem like they've got answers for. The 3 trade down thing, Nick, I don't want to think this far into the future. I'm about to make somebody roll their eyes into the back of their head. But if you told me that the Bears were going to do a triple trade back or the 3 trade back thing, wouldn't it stand to reason that the team that they took 3 firsts from would potentially be at its worst in that 2026 season? Because then they just went 2 more off seasons without first round picks.
Yep.
So maybe we all chuckle and say to ourselves, well, every year going forward, we'll have 2 first round picks to scrub together and potentially move on. Like,
No. Every year, Poles is going to find the number 1 pick somehow.
that would be sick.
This is just going to be the way. I mean, I play a lot of fantasy, Robert, and I always try to figure out who's going to be the worst the next year and get there first a year early. Sometimes it works out and you feel like a genius. Sometimes, you don't, but it could be a lot of fun. Do you want to close out so we can get to some of the questions from our chat here? We got a lot of people here.
Yeah, I think that sounds good. I mean, more than anything, closing this thing out, like, y'all, this has turned into a really fun Bear season. It's not the Bears season that I expected. It's not the fun I expected to be having, to be honest with you, Nick. We were there when we were predicting the Bears record. We said 7 bars was the win. Here they are. For better or for worse, it does feel like that was the bar. And now Matt Eberflus is staying, regardless of our feelings about the matter, right? But the arrow feels definitively pointing up. Thank God. Like, I mean, this rules. It's so much fun watching a Bears team that doesn't feel like it's getting outclassed every Sunday. The Bears gave the Browns a better game than the Jets did. Like, I know that that's a low bar to plenty, but there are plenty of these teams that the transitive property is working real well for the Bears. Let me put it that way, right? Where it's like the Bears smoked the Lions, arguably twice, and then they give the Dallas Cowboys a game that makes you wonder, okay, what would these Bears look like against Dallas? Because the latest time the Bears have gotten blown out was Los Angeles. Like, there is a point, and we're quickly reaching it, where we can say the Bears right now are just playing really well. probably as good as I've seen them play collectively since 2018.
Yep.
And now, is that sustainable? Good question. But instead of being at the top of the hill, they're still on the way up, which is really exciting. And even if they spend their resources badly, they should at least be better throughout the next 365 days of your life, Bears fan. And I see that as a big positive.
Easily. Easily.
What about you? Final thoughts
Um, okay, first off, I don't know when this is gonna get released, but Happy New Year, y'all.
today. I mean, it's going to be live and I'm going to have it posted by
Okay.
the evening so that I can
Okay.
leave.
All right. So happy New Year, everyone. Be safe, okay? Make smart decisions, call Ubers, etc. If you're going to be out and partying. Um, but celebrate Chicago having 7 wins, y'all. Even if they don't win next week, they have more than doubled their win total. They are close to average in the NFL. Justin Fields played well. A lot of the young guys played well. The secondary, Dexter, lots of guys have played well, which only gives us a lot of hope. And hope is so much more fun in the offseason
Yes.
than doom and gloom. But we get the first pick and we get the rising roster. So everything is fun. Be nice on Twitter, man. There are way too many battles on there right now, man. Like everything is a good choice. Just trust Ryan Poles.
Oh, yeah. Cannot wait. Cannot wait. I want to read one quote for you because I think it's hilarious. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to give everybody a warning. I'm not going to mark the podcast explicit, but this quote from DJ Moore involves an explicit word, and I am not taking it out because it's hilarious. But so somebody asked DJ Moore about the Bears getting the #1 overall pick, and he said, I mean, shit, I was the #1 pick when they traded for me. But I mean, thanks to Carolina. That's all I can say to that. And DJ, we agree. But so,
I
yeah,
I have one other thing. Sorry.
go for it.
Okay, that is awesome and true,
Yep.
right? Like if you knew you had a 1,300-yard receiver at the age of 26 and you could have him, yeah, that's worth easily a top 10 pick,
Yes or
right?
no, do you think he goes and asks for a raise? I think the answer is yes,
He deserves a
but
raise. He deserves a raise.
it
Just
just makes
give
the
it to him.
cap question weirder.
Yeah.
But so overall, man, I'll close up by just we already did closings, but gosh. Okay, so for anybody listening, first of all, thank you for listening. Get your Q&A in for our Thursday show when we preview the final game of the season, which could be a very raucous Packers week that brings the Bears to 8 wins for the first time since 2020, was it? But anyways, so second of all, rate us, like the show, like it on YouTube, tell your friends, tell us where we could get better, tell us where we could improve. But moreover, a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts and Spotify goes further than you realize because it basically tricks their algorithms into serving more Bears fans our show so that we can get this thing off the ground. The better ratings we get, the more shows you get. The moment this show puts a little money in me and Nick's pocket is the moment we get to do 3 shows. And so that's always been the goal, but we got to get enough listens so that we can sell it to sponsors and put a little ad break in the middle that everybody can work out with. You get it. This is how content is. But
Mhm.
third of all, thank you so much to everybody who listens. You guys have made this season fun for the both of us, and we have had so much fun putting this thing together. Have a wonderful and happy new year, just like Nick said. Be safe out there. Go Bears. And until next time, bear down, and thank you so much for bearing with us. Boom, and we are clear there. Okay, so Nick, let me hit you with the hottest question that I see in here. What percentage chance do you think Caleb Williams is better than Fields? What percentage chance do you think he's roughly the same? And what percentage chance do you think he's worse?
To me, I don't think that's fair. I mean, put Caleb Williams in the same situation Fields had with Nagy year one, last year, the complete
You
Bear
don't get to
roster.
though. That
That's
sucks.
that's how you have to judge things, in my opinion.
They have to be exactly the same?
I do. I think that's the way you judge things because, like, let's say they do trade Fields and they draft Caleb.
Yes.
Caleb walks in with DJ Moore.
Right.
I
And
mean,
probably another receiver.
like, what do we? I think that Caleb. Well, I will. Caleb does throw on time, and I think reads better than Fields does. Um, but there are other things I think that I'm a little concerned about Caleb's size.
Mhm.
And people that think that's not a thing, look at Russ and Kyler and anyone short thrown over the middle of the field. Bryce Young, it's a thing. Um, Holding up in the NFL, I mean, he holds the ball out pretty loose when he's running around. So that could be a negative. Um, could be worse. I don't think that Caleb Williams could be a flat out bust based on how he plays on the field. I just don't know in terms of all the off the field stuff, which we won't know.
That's the thing. Like the part that I lean on Nick for this. So on the field, like if we were gonna build a little fence around the film as I have seen it, right? To answer your question directly, new poster, I personally think that there's about a 35% chance that Caleb is better, a 50% chance he's at least as good, and a 15% chance he's worse. But now let's get out of that box, right? Because Caleb has a lot of questions right now around his character,
Mhm.
and it is character questioning season. Let's
Yep.
not forget Dan Orlovsky stating that Justin Fields was a last in, first out guy. This happens, right? We literally don't know who to trust at this point.
Hmm.
But as stupid as it sounds, Nick, like this Caleb Williams, Bo Callahan, all the jokes you want to make about draft
Yep.
day, like
Yep.
that's the stupid stuff that you're asking about Caleb right now because the tape is really great. Like that's at least what I see, right? Is it's great tape. What about the person? When you go out to dinner with him, does he make you want to put your steak knife in your stomach by 45 minutes through? Like is he too much to deal with? Blah 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 blah
Right.
blah. Right? And it's such a funny conversation, Nick, because you and I are not going to know. We're
No.
not going to
Well,
get any good
we
answers.
heard the rumors he wants a stake percentage in ownership of a team, but like,
Never
is that
confirmed
true?
ever. It was said once, right?
Okay.
But what does that mean it wasn't said?
Right.
Right? Like, was
I don't
Florio
know.
the only one gutsy enough to report it? Or we just never got it corroborated. It's
Yeah.
it's baloney.
Yeah. So nothing bears. Okay. I have to talk about one other thing. Now that we're off air,
Do it.
I can do this on the thing. I got to show off, Robert.
Yes.
Fantasy football. This is the championship week for anyone playing fantasy, right? So whether you play redraft, you draft your team every year, dynasty, you keep the guys every
Mm-hmm.
year to year. So um I'm into, I would say, just big money leagues, Robert.
Mm-hmm.
My most expensive league, I had my first undefeated season ever last year.
Yes, you did.
I went every game, closed it out, and I got rewarded handsomely.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you did.
This year, Robert, that team is undefeated in the championship game right now and has a 99 percentile chance of winning the championship. So I will just crown myself right now 2 years in a row of not losing in my most expensive league. And my second most expensive league, I have a 99% chance of winning that one as well. So pretty pumped about that. Y'all, if you're in the chat, maybe throw out some of your fantasy stuff too, because it's the championship game. I wish you guys luck.
You do a really, really good job with this. I mean, your track record obviously speaks for itself. Not to mention, it sounds like you were really bullish on Christian McCaffrey. And what I heard from all my fantasy guys this year is that basically, if you were bullish on anybody else, that person snake bit you. Whereas if you drafted McCaffrey and rode McCaffrey, based on what I have been told, you tell me if I'm right or not. Like Justin Jefferson, you missed a ton of the season. Like plenty of other options. Bijan, it just didn't materialize the way that I think a lot of people wanted it to. McCaffrey, though, steady, tons of points the
Yeah,
whole season long.
he was unbelievable. I mean, I don't know if you heard of the Scott Fishbowl, Robert, or no?
I have heard
Remember?
of Scott Fish.
Okay, so Scott's a good friend, by the way,
Hmm.
y'all. But that's like an industry and fan, the biggest tournament in the world.
Right?
It's all for good cause, y'all. So if you guys ever want to, you can donate. I think they raised over $100,000 for Toys for Tots and for good causes this year, which is cool.
That's awesome.
Anyway, there's like, I don't know, I think it was 5,000 some people in it this year. I finished in the top 500 mainly because I picked McCaffrey, but also I lost Rodgers and a few people. So it was a good season overall. But I hope you all had um, good seasons too. So one question I have that's non-fields based because we're so focused on
We
fields,
are disgustingly
so
focused on Fields.
so focused on fields and quarterback. Man, like with how Dexter's playing, Robert,
Give it to me.
and how Stevenson's playing,
Mm-hmm.
do you even add like a starting DT? I mean, you could add like a later day two D tackle, but do you add an early or sign a Chris Jones D tackle or or a starting level corner, or are you like, hey, we're gonna ride with these two kids?
Corners, I think you're good. Not and that I hope that's not me trying to be ridiculous here. I think as long as you still have Jaylen Johnson on the roster, you're pretty square. Like you've got 4 DBs you like, use it. Right? At some point you have to play into the value of your roster. Would you agree? And right now,
Yeah.
the fact that the secondary is relatively under control is a real positive. But D line, I think Dexter looks awesome. He's not consistent enough against the run
No.
for me to say he's the only DT. This isn't Madden. I am still comfortable with him as a reserve DT if that means we got somebody legit better than him. And so for me, I can't help but think, Nick, that this defense still needs one more field tilter. I don't really care whether that's an edge rusher or whether that's a three technique or whether that's Dexter Lawrence in a trade back with the Giants. You know what I mean? But you
Mhm.
need probably one more, and then you need some reserve guys from there. And so the Chris Jones thing is a fun idea. We'll see if it happens, but that could be a move that you may feel like gets you over the edge. Maybe you do go for Christian Wilkins since he's a little younger. Maybe you
Yep.
go for Daniil Hunter because he's a little cheaper and kind of gives you the best of both worlds. But me personally, Nick, I am fine letting Dexter and Pickens find their way into a rotation because I think the best defenses in the league have a rotation. And maybe more importantly, all right, so it's week 17. If
Well,
this
hold on.
happened,
We're on the same page with that, by the way.
oh, I bet.
Like rotation is what you need, y'all. Like
Hmm.
at the end of the game here, I think Sweat tackles Heineke, but he got tired on his touchdown run.
Hmm.
Like if you get more rotation, they stay fresher. They're better when they're out there. Like I am all for more talent on the D line that
Another
rotate.
another thing, I'm about to knock on wood because now that I've mentioned it, it's going to happen. Bro, we went the entire season. Andrew Billings, Demarcus Walker, like even at his time, Yannick Ngakoue, like nobody got hurt. I mean, it's actually pretty unbelievable that the
Yeah.
Bears went with a whole season with no defensive line issues. And if they had any defensive line issues,
Oh, bad.
problems would have popped up a lot faster.
Bad. Yeah.
Like they didn't have the depth to deal with any of the problems that they didn't encounter. Lucky for them, they didn't encounter them. And the moment that they did deal with their season beginning edge one getting hurt, lol, they had traded for another one, and they just
Mhm.
moved on without worrying about it at all. And
Yep.
so there's to me, you need more guys for depth because if you sign a Chris Jones, you may still only get 12, maybe even as few as 8 games out of him. And Dexter may be your starting three tech for 8 of those games. You need a decent three tech for those
Mhm.
8 games. And Dexter may be that guy. But when you're at your best, you want to try to be suffocating, in my
Yep.
opinion, especially if it only costs you another $30 million. But it's not my
Well, I
money.
mean, that's like what the Eagles have designed, is the when they drafted 2 Georgia D linemen
Right.
mainly just to rotate because that's how it works. So just a few things in the chat here. I think it's Brano. Sorry, man. You drafted Justin Jefferson. He got hurt over McCaffrey. Um, yeah, you have to hit us up. Maybe we can have a power. I can help people on their fantasy teams next year.
Matthew Brown.
Here's a
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Matthew Brown asks you,
That's what I was gonna ask you that one.
do you trade Jaylen Johnson for a late first?
My answer is yes. I would trade
Ooh.
him for a late first for a couple of reasons. This is just like the Roquan thing, right?
Hmm.
You get the pick and you get the money to sign guys to fill in for that void. I like a Jalen Johnson. Don't get me wrong. I would pay him. But if I can save 20, what's he going to want? 22, 23, maybe more. If I can get that money, save it, get a first, then I can use that money on whatever positions, draft whatever. I think it's gonna turn out better in the long run when you add in Johnson's also injury history.
Now that we're talking about it, I think it all depends on what you think that the team's timeline is. Because if you draft a new rookie cornerback or quarterback, I'm comfortable trading Jaylen Johnson to also draft a new rookie cornerback. I have no problem with this. I love Jaylen. To me, it's harder to find good DBs than people want to think it is. But at the same time, I can't really say that when Ryan Poles has drafted Kyler Gordon, Ryan Poles has drafted Tyreek Stevenson, Ryan Poles has drafted a solid looking depth guy in Terrell Smith. So maybe it's not as hard as I'm making it. Maybe the Bears were just bad at it earlier, right?
Right.
But at least looking at it, Nick, I think it's something you got to consider. I also wouldn't be surprised if Jaylen Johnson's going to really struggle to get a late first. That the bigger issue
Yeah.
you'd come with is that you're going to get a late second best case scenario. So you shrug your shoulders and you keep him because it's just not worth it to let a
Right.
guy like that go. But
And I think part of it too is when you see some of these guys that hang on at corner to stay at that top level, there's not many. Like JC Jackson was awesome for New England. Signs a big money deal, goes to the Chargers, and is terrible. I mean, Jair Alexander, besides Jair's off the field or coin toss stuff, his play dropped a lot this year. And so, and we always have the threat of guys. Here's the other part. You always have the threat of guys retiring, Robert. I'm
yep,
just going to retire. So anytime I can get the assets, and again,
assets are
you
good.
talk about like probabilities, right? Dividing a vast portfolio for the financial people, like when I can diversify, I'm going to do it. I get a pick, I get money. Yep, I'm going to keep doing that as many times because it's going to increase my odds.
Brano asks on the Justin topic, they mentioned the possibility of trading 2 to 3 first rounders and Scary Terry for number one. That would be a trade with Washington. Under that scenario, would I be happy retaining Fields and taking that trade? So, Brano, one thing that I've tried to avoid talking about for as long as I could is that from a value perspective, I've even brought it up in plenty of cases. There's a point where you're making a trade so enticing that it is simply better than any one football player under any circumstance could ever be. And a trade package like that, yeah, pretty much. Like, especially for crying out loud, Brano. I don't know if you thought about this, but Washington is number 2 right now. So if you somehow got offered 2 to 3 first round picks, Scary Terry, and you still had the opportunity to trade with another team to get another 2 or 3 first round picks to offer up Drake May, it would be disgusting. And
Mhm.
realistically, I almost think you'd have to. What do I think
Oh,
of Fields? That doesn't matter. Like, I'd be happy with the situation and I'd figure it out. But I'll tell you, Brando, right now, I am just generally, and Nick, I think you've picked up on this season, I am generally terrified of the Bears getting quarterback wrong. The Bears have been getting quarterback wrong my whole life. And I am generally terrified of the Bears
well,
getting
yeah, but
quarterback wrong.
but also, Robert, okay, we've talked about this earlier. Your Bears life is way less than mine. Okay, you didn't have to go through the Cade McNown,
I didn't have to go
um,
through it, but you look in the history book
Rick
and you realize
Meyer.
it's still been that bad.
I mean,
Like, it falls on you at some point. You know what I'm saying, Nick?
I'm just saying I've been through more of it, and I'm still.
And at
I would
least
do that. I mean, let's not forget, man.
mhm,
I mean, like the story coming out later after that Ryan Poles was almost, almost just like I don't know, shark enough to go with the double trade down last year that he tried. Like, if he's that like maddened up, like Madden, everyone's like,
mhm,
yeah, or
mhm.
PFF mock draft simulator, like, I'm gonna trade down here, then I'm gonna do this, then I'm gonna do this. Like, I'm gonna be so he's that sneaky as that in his mind. Like,
Oh,
I
yeah.
am all for it, and I trust him.
And at least when I look at this, the main thing that I'm thinking about with quarterback, and at the end of the day, I trust Ryan Poles with whatever he wants to do. I really do. I really do. But at least when I am thinking about this thing going forward, Nick, the scariest part is that Bears fans have always taken the sure thing over the potential great thing for as long as I've seen it. Like, why move on from Jay? We like Jay. Why move on from Mitch? We like Mitch. Why move on from Justin? We like Justin.
Is it
Justin's different. Justin's different.
wasn't Kyle Orton the safe thing, and they
People
tried to
still
go
like
with yeah,
Kyle
but they
Orton,
tried to go with Jay then. That's kinda shooting for it.
and people still think it was the wrong call. Like, and so The only thing I'm looking at, Rex, at this point, just speaking to you, Rex Smith, and plenty of others, is I am I am more scared about both than anything. Like right now, Rex, I have gotten so neurotic that I can't reasonably tell you, Nick. Like I can't look you in the eyes and be like, I want to draft Caleb Williams and bang the table. I don't have the guts to do it. I don't have the guts to bang the table for either option. I'm so scared of holding the bag and watching Justin be a superstar somewhere else, or worse, the Bears not have a good enough team to support what might be a special rookie, and we end up being the Chargers, right? I don't know how that would happen, just given their current construction. But that's scary too. Like, the team isn't good enough, but when is it ever going to be good enough? Was Buffalo good enough when they took Josh Allen? Not a chance. Was like Houston good
No.
enough when they took Deshaun Watson? No way. Like before other stuff happened. The Chiefs are kind of it, and they didn't take Mahomes at one. And I think all the stuff about what like quarterbacks at one and the record, blah blah blah. I think it's kind of silly, just because like if you think he's the best prospect, you think he's the best prospect. But at the same time, I'm just gonna let Ryan Poles do it.
Yep.
For once, I'm glad he gets the $1 million and I don't, because I actually don't think there's an easy answer here. There are, I think, a lot of ways, Nick, that in 2 years we could say, hey, we're happy with what we got, but man, wouldn't it have been sweet if we did this instead? That's all I'm saying. Like, that we can end up content with this, like, 10 to 11 win team for like 3 to 5 years. Maybe we don't win a Super Bowl. Maybe we don't win the NFC North. Like, maybe we don't, but we win a bunch of games. And maybe all the people on Twitter, everybody gets tired of hearing the name Caleb Williams the same way that Bears fans got tired of hearing the name Mahomes. I don't know. Doesn't mean we can't be content with whatever we do. But Nick, I'll tell you, that's all I'm scared of at this point is it's like, oh my gosh, the Bears are on the precipice of winning a Super Bowl. That's it. Is that the best way to put it? It's like
Yeah.
the Bears can win a Super Bowl with this stuff. It's the first time in 25 years that they could actually win a Super Bowl. Will they? They need a lot to go right.
I just think it's exciting that Poles is that dude.
Right?
Like that's the best part. That's why like I don't have the worry. I had that with Pace. I had that with Jerry Angelo. Like people can go back to all these GMs, but dude, um, Ryan Poles, dude, is like he doesn't bat 1,000 or 100% like no one does,
No.
but he's doing really, really, really well.
I mean, Chase Claypool trade was good process. Made the same trade with Montez Sweat, and look at what good process will do for you. Like the other thing is trading down is kind of the trading trading the first round overall pick, Nick, is trading not to lose, and you probably won't lose. Like it'll be hard to lose a trade with that many resources, right?
Right. But it's still different because it's not like it's like, well, we have Jimmy Garoppolo.
Mm-hmm.
Like you still have a
Exactly.
dude that could be really good.
People were excited about Jimmy Garoppolo once.
Well, I remember he was the highest paid quarterback in the NFL by Kyle Shanahan, who also did the Trey Lance thing. Like again, they don't. No one's perfect,
Mm-hmm.
but it can happen. Any other questions, guys?
Let's see here. Oh, I wanted to put this on you, Nick. So people have mentioned Scary Terry. If you're trading with Washington, call me nuts, but you're taking a receiver when you get down there. So which of the D linemen do you want?
Well, here's a take. Okay,
Give it to me.
I'm a big Terry McLaurin fan. I'm going to state that. In fact, going back to fantasy, Robert, I was on a podcast where before the combine, someone's like, "Hey, give me a way out there sleeper that you like." I'm like, "Well, I like Terry McLaurin. I think he was Mr. Ohio from what I remember off the top of my head, or Mr. Indiana, wherever he's from. Um, did okay at Ohio State, nothing great, just a great athlete, and then he did what he did. He's 28. He'll be 29 next year for the NFL season.
Okay.
He carries a little bit of a price tag.
Does.
I would rather have Jahan Dotson.
Oh, see, you mixed up my order. I was saying which of
I know
the
you said D line. I'm just telling you that part of it.
gotcha.
Like, because when you're talking
Dotson
about this
sweet.
window,
Dotson sweet.
age matters. And
Age does
so,
matter, which is why I
and
think I'd
so,
want 26-year-old totally tradable Deron Payne. I looked at the contract. if they process this trade after June 1st, Washington actually saves $15 million in cap space. If they don't, they just eat dead cap of his cap hit, and there's no negative in there,
Yep.
which I sit here and look at and I'm like, oh, like that works if we're doing the same trade as last year, like an established superstar in Deron Payne. Man, can you imagine what he'd do as your three tech? He'd be a monster. Like if you
So
had Payne rotating with Gervon Dexter and you had Andrew Billings next to him with Montez Sweat on the end, geez, man.
I'm curious on that contract right now. You got me looking it up. Now here's one thing that is not great about Deron Payne right now.
Being less than good.
He's
Not
the
less than good, but
he's
you
the
get
45th PFF D tackle this year.
it.
And he had a spike year last year, which got him paid, but he didn't always play up to that. Okay, so his deal, they would have to take let's see, they would have to take the dead cap. So the cap hits it, we'd pay him what 20, 21.6, 26.1, 28. I wonder what we would have to pay out of all that. 'Cause you got to take the dead cap out of it.
You should go. All right. So I want you, Nick, and everybody in here. I want you to go to X right now. Go to Twitter. Okay. Do you do this on your desktop?
Yeah.
I want you to go to Marvin Harrison's Twitter
Right now?
right now. We're all going to do this together.
Marvin Harrison Jr. or Marvin Harrison?
Marvin Harrison Jr.
Okay.
I want you to click over to his likes.
Oh, my man. That's good.
Would you like to tell the class what you see?
Yeah. So PFF Fantasy Football put out a tweet that says, have a day, DJ Moore. And it's puts all of his stats and his PPR points. And then I'll be honest, there's a picture of DJ Moore where he looks like a bad
He
man.
looking
He's
cold.
got that visor, his hands are in there, and he's just like, I'm that dude.
Mhm.
And Marvin Harrison Jr. liked it.
So Marvin Harrison Jr. liking pro Bears tweets. I mean, I would do the same if I was him. Like, if I was even Marvin Harrison's situation, like I want what is this? I want the Bears to consider taking me at one. Duh. Right? Chancellor Poll shouldn't do it just because of the value you can get in the trade back. We've talked about this enough, right? But if I was Marvin Harrison, I would be doing whatever I had to do to make an impression with the guys sitting up at number one. Anything you want to do before we close this thing up?
Speaking of receiver, this will be my last question, I guess, to you. If the Bears don't draft a wide receiver in round 1, are you disappointed?
So initially, yes, and then I'll get over it because for all I know, Poles doesn't value the position like that. Now, I imagine he does because he traded for DJ Moore, who was a number one, or who was a first round wide receiver. But I'm not going to twist myself into knots if the Bears get a really sweet player that doesn't happen to play receiver, given that right now, I mean, we'll see what happens, but for all we know, Nick, you're going to end up like I'm already seeing draft sites that are starting to push Keon Coleman down the board because
I am too.
he's a big dude that while he does separate, he's got attitude concerns, he's got a motor concern, all kinds of things that I will happily embrace if the Bears end up taking him in the high second round. Like, I'll be like, I don't care. You know what I mean? AJ Brown, if memory serves, was a second rounder. DK Metcalf was a second rounder. If that's the direction they go with this, that's the direction they go with this. But it's
Yep.
more to say that I will process it and then I will get over it because I turned around and loved the Kyler Gordon pick eventually. But I do think they know that they need more weapons at wide receiver. They made the Chase Claypool trade on purpose, right?
Right. Right. I mean, to me, like if they do something like that, and I mean, again, like this is with a bunch of trades, y'all. But if they don't pick a receiver in round 1, then they have to get multiple on day 2 for me to be okay. Because again, my biggest thing, no matter what, this entire offseason, Robert, whether it's Caleb, whether it's Fields, the endless debate, or May, whoever is your quarterback, support him with an embarrassment of riches at weapons and protect him. because that is the formula in the NFL now. I'm sick of like, man, if we had this, if we had that, like, just give them to him. I don't care if it's like, man, our wide receiver three is better than most wide receiver twos and we're wasting talent out there. I don't care because it's going to equal W's. Like, support our quarterback.
Mhm. Support the quarterback, like the quarterback spot. I mean,
Mhm.
this the league has moved on, probably for the better, from the quarterback needs to be the only piece of the team that matters. A lot of teams are building this, which is great. But we'll see. We'll see. Either way, Nick, I got to get this thing edited and then I got to
Yeah.
get out to a couple different New Year's things. So, everybody, you guys have a great time this evening, even if it's just watching the Bears highlights over and over again. I will see you Tuesday night as we get to go through a fun football game, top to bottom. No, nothing depressing about this one. This one was just through and through. Y'all, it is Packers week. Like, we're ready to roll. Marshan, thank you so much. Let me see. I had Cody Owen. You mentioned the slower playing surface at Soldier Field, helping Jaylen as a corner without elite speed. How do you think that translates to a dome team? Do you have an answer about that, Nick?
Um, I don't actually.
I would argue they're faster. He's faster on a dome. If anything, in my opinion, having bad footing makes it harder to land your jam. It totally just me guessing off the top of my head, but I imagine that part of the reason that Jalen's been able to play like he has, don't forget his game in Motown where he looked great, right?
Yeah.
Like that he's able to better break out or on dome surfaces, and it all basically evens out.
I just think that the game is slowed down for him, and that's made him play faster. He's playing like a veteran now, which honestly, that's about the time when you really should. And here, someone said Coleman just isn't that good. To me, I think Coleman doesn't separate as well. Robert, I know you said that, but
Sure.
like he he does certain things really well, which reminds you of like a DK Metcalf type, like a size freak. Um, so I think as long as you don't put the huge expectations on his shoulders, he could still thrive.
Right. That's the thing. Everybody comparing him to Marvin, I think, was going a little off. But I don't know. I see a guy with good feet. But anyways, there's more tape for that later. For
Yep.
now, you guys enjoy it. I gotta get this thing edited. I will talk to you soon. Bear down. Thanks so much.